Imperial Banquet. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. Let me catch my breath first. Also, no matter what happens, I have more important things to do first. And that naturally was to concoct the 5 elements karmic pill. Otherwise, why would he have gone out on a trip in the first place? Of course, he had reaped huge rewards from this trip. He had obtained a piece of origin gold. And this was a good fortune that even saints did not have. There was also the Buddhist race's 6 characters bright king curse. Even if it was only a single word, it was still a supreme precious technique. He first went to concoct the 5 elements karmic pill. It was not difficult to concoct, but the difficulty lay in gathering the ingredients. With Ling Han's abilities as a grandmaster alchemist, there was naturally no problem in concocting it. He constructed a formation, stimulating the flames of heaven and earth, and began to concoct the alchemical pill. Half a day later, the 5 elements karmic pill was completed. There was only one, and it was a mixture of 5 colors, yet it formed a perfect balance. Ling Han didn't hesitate at all, immediately ingesting the alchemical pill. At the beginning, the medicinal effects did not take effect. Everything was normal, but very soon, a turbulent change took place. It was clear that his level of being had not advanced, but the shackles were automatically shattering. It was as if heaven and earth had moved, unleashing his potential. This process lasted for about an hour, unlocking 10% of the shackles on Ling Han's body, and this was not what made Ling Han the happiest. Because with the help of this alchemical pill, Ling Han could completely see the shackles in his body. Previously, he could only sense the shackles when his level of being was soaring, but it was also seeing one shackle after another, and he had not looked at them from a holistic perspective. In truth, he did not know how many shackles there were in his body at all. It was like he was running blindfolded, and only knew that he was advancing, but he did not have the slightest impression of how far away the end point was. But now, he could see how many shackles there were in his body. In future, he would have a direction and a goal. If these shackles were not broken, he would definitely not break through to celestial path. I don't feel anything. Ling Han exercised his limbs, but didn't feel any improvement in his abilities. It was still the same as before. Father, unlocking the shackles will only decrease the obstruction of climbing the mountain in the future. It won't make you immediately become stronger, second baby said. Ling Han smiled faintly. He was only sighing. In truth, he was already capable of sweeping aside all opposition in Mystery Realm tier and being invincible within this cultivation level. Only then did he meet up with Princess Bixiao and find out about the current situation. Reality surprised him because aside from Tang Yuner and Yo Jianhua, there were actually a great many extraterrestrial visitors that had descended. They were all the descendants of great elites. Their elders had predicted that the celestial sea planet was about to awaken, and there would be great opportunities. So they sent their own descendants over to see if they could gain some glory. In terms of star level, the grade of the celestial sea planet definitely couldn't be considered high, but the heaven and earth had just awakened, so there would definitely be a great many thousand-year-old treasured medicines appearing. There were some that even sect master-level elites were tempted by, so it was naturally necessary for them to make a trip. However, the treasure troves had already been allocated cleanly, and there was no news of any celestial plants appearing. Hence, a great many extraterrestrial outsiders settled down in the imperial capital. After all, this place was prosperous. Now, from the eldest imperial prince to the 13th imperial prince, all of them have leaped over the celestial gate and become foundation-building tier elites, Princess Bixiao said. You must be careful. Though His Majesty is protecting you, those people are His Majesty's own children, after all. Even if they really killed you, His Majesty would not punish them harshly. In a one-on-one battle, she was unafraid of even the eldest imperial prince, who was born with a divine physique. However, if it was a battle of 1 against 13, even if she could match them, it was inevitable that she would be careless. It was impossible that she would be able to protect Ling Han completely. Ling Han nodded. Right now, the pressure on him was still quite heavy. After all, if he wasn't a foundation-building cultivator, he would only be immortal in the end. As long as all the shackles are unlocked, I will begin to break through to celestial path. Ling Han thought. He was sure that by that time, he would have accumulated enough mystical power to leap over the celestial gate. Next, he began to live a low-key life. He stayed in his room all day and cultivated for a while. Most of his time was spent on the practice of the in-character. This Buddhist race technique was truly extensive and profound. It was clearly just a single word, yet it could produce all kinds of changes. He discovered that he was still far from grasping the true meaning of this word. After the little lowly and the pervert pig met, they actually hit it off at first sight and began to plan something in collusion. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to care about them either. He only said that it was fine if they wanted to cause damage, but they definitely had to target bad people. For example, the 7th Imperial Prince. A few days later, Princess Bixiao came to look for him. Empress Ma, Imperial Consort Lin and the others have joined forces to host a banquet, and have also given 2 invitations to the Foreign Affairs Department. This princess of the demon race said, "They're still in the mood to host a banquet at a time like this?" Ling Han took the invitation and opened it. The words were very limited, just clearly expressing an invitation: the banquet tomorrow night at Jihua Palace in the Imperial Palace. The eldest Imperial Prince and the others have broken through to Celestial Path, and this is naturally a grand event for the Imperial family. However, His Majesty has not appeared all this while, and no one else has had the chance to bring this up. Now, the 13th Prince has also broken through a month ago, and the Empress and noblewomen could no longer bear it, Princess Bixiao said. When a mother hosts a celebratory feast for her son, even if His Majesty knows, it would not be appropriate to reprimand her. Princess Bixiao paused for a moment before asking, "Are you going?" "Of course I'm going," Ling Han said with a smile. According to Princess Bixiao, Ling Han had best not show himself. When he advanced into Celestial Path, even if he was outnumbered with his freakish talent, it would not be a problem for him to carve out a bloody path to escape. But now, no matter how invincible you are in Mystery Realm tier, you are still mortal. How could mortals fight against Celestials? Then you had best keep a low profile, and not give the eldest Imperial Prince and the others the chance to flip out, she said solemnly. "Don't I have you to protect me?" Ling Han teased. "Do you think I'm your bodyguard?" Princess Bixiao asked in irritation. Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. He didn't have any ulterior motives toward this princess of the demon race, so he knew when to stop. He didn't tease her any further, lest something happen. Moreover, the Empress and the others were about to come out. If they saw that Ling Han had courted a girl outside, they would definitely be jealous. When Tang Yuner found out, she also shouted that she wanted to go to the Imperial Palace. Naturally, she was suppressed by Ling Han. This little devil only knew how to cause damage, and if she went, who knew what kind of calamity would be caused? The little lowly was naturally very displeased, pouting and sulking. There, just obediently stay at home. Ling Han tossed the perverted pig over to the little lowly. Pa, in a fit of pique, the little lowly pushed with both hands, and threw out the perverted pig that had been thrown at her. "Goo!" the perverted pig screamed. Who had it offended? On the evening of the second day, Ling Han and Princess Bixiao arrived at the entrance. To attend the imperial banquet, they naturally had to travel by car. If they ran over on foot, that would really be laughable. Today, Princess Bixiao was wearing light makeup. She was already extremely enchanting to begin with, and now, she was even more dazzling, causing Ling Han to whistle involuntarily. "I say, are you planning to steal the limelight from the main characters?" he asked, smiling. Princess Bixiao rolled her eyes at him. A girl will dress herself up for him who loves her. Understand? Forced marriage, although martial arts had recovered, and modern technology could no longer contend with martial artists, there were still some things that were very practical. For example, a car. Ling Han and Princess Bixiao sat in an extended car, which was very eye-catching. However, the speed was really too slow, and it took them more than 40 minutes to finally arrive within the vicinity of the Imperial Palace. Originally, this place was a restricted area, and the driver could not go any further. But this time, Ling Han and the princess both had invitations, so he told the driver to continue driving. At the entrance to the Imperial Palace, they were stopped, and only after carefully examining their invitations were they allowed to pass. The driver was extremely excited. It was naturally impossible for him to enter into the imperial palace. But now, not only had he entered, he had even driven his car in, making him feel as if he was in a dream. Very quickly, the car arrived at Jihua Palace. The driver refused to accept the money no matter what and said, "My lord and lady, it's all thanks to you that I had the chance to enter the imperial palace and realize my lifelong dream. How can I still accept your money?" With these words, Ling Han and Princess Bixiao didn't insist any longer. They alighted from the car. It wasn't time for the banquet yet, but there was already a sea of people here. Obviously, the Empress and the imperial consorts had invited a great many people this time. The Foreign Affairs Department only had 2 invitations, and that was because the imperial princes and the Foreign Affairs Department did not have a good relationship with the Foreign Affairs Department, so they had only given 2 invitations to be polite. By the looks of it, all the clans in the imperial capital, large and small, had been invited. However, a great many people were not qualified to enter into the palace, so they could only join in on the excitement outside. But for these people, being able to enter into the imperial palace was already a great honor. Not only were there clans from the imperial capital, but there were also sects and forces that had submitted to the Dark North Nation. The Empress had sent an invitation, so who would dare to take it lightly? This was the wife of a spirit transformation true lord. No matter what, they had to give her some face. Thus, today was really a day when everyone revolved around the main characters. Ling Han and Princess Bixiao were extremely low-key, and they didn't greet anyone. However, Princess Bixiao was far too beautiful, and she immediately became the focus of everyone's attention upon disembarking from the car. They all stared at her without blinking. Even now, there was still an extremely limited number of newly advanced celestial path elites, and as for females, only Princess Bixiao was one of them. Even if she was not very beautiful, she would still gain a great deal of attention. What more when she was breathtakingly beautiful? The 2 of them couldn't keep a low profile even if they wanted to. The crowds discussed spiritedly, and the news of the arrival of the 2 chiefs of the Foreign Affairs Department quickly spread out. Ling Han didn't mind. So be it if it was known. If he was afraid of trouble, he wouldn't have come either. After entering the hall, the 2 of them found their own seats. However, what was infuriating was that not only were their seats not together, but Ling Han, the chief of the department, actually fell far behind Princess Bixiao. Was this in accordance with the rules? Ling Han stroked his chin and said, "His Majesty personally bestowed you the title of princess. Thus, it's reasonable to place you in front." Princess Bixiao frowned and said, "This is clearly a show of strength for you. They want to embarrass you, and you're just going to tolerate it." This was not in line with Ling Han's personality. Ling Han smiled and said, "Look at what you're saying. Am I the kind of person who would take revenge for the smallest grievance?" Princess Bixiao did not speak, but her eyes were filled with certainty. "It's fine. Believe me, I've been cultivating my temperament recently. As long as others don't step on top of me, I can't be bothered," Ling Han said with a smile. Though Princess Bixiao did not quite believe it, she did not say anything. She went ahead. She was exquisitely beautiful, and now that she had advanced into celestial path, her bearing was also ethereal and captivating. Naturally, she was immediately revered by the masses. All the imperial princes gathered around her, trying their best to curry her favor. To say nothing else, merely the fact that she was the first person to advance into celestial path after the awakening of heaven and earth made her worthy of marrying. It was not just the imperial princes. The extraterrestrial visitors were also very interested in Princess Bixiao. They were completely unafraid of those imperial princes, and similarly approached to cotton up to her. When it was 7 o'clock, the sky was already completely dark, and the guests had all arrived. Empress Ma and the other imperial consorts all came out, and a dead silence instantly fell. Though their strength was very ordinary, they were the wives and concubines of a spirit transformation true lord, so they naturally had to be respected. After a few words from the noblewomen, the banquet began. Ling Han merely ate with his head lowered. He couldn't be bothered to lower himself to the level of these women. Speaking of which, they were all his juniors, so he couldn't bring himself to argue with them. Of course, the prerequisite was that they did not trifle with him. With Chun Fengyan suppressing them, the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. Everyone was complimenting the eldest imperial prince and the others, praising them as giants among men, and saying that their future achievements wouldn't be inferior to Chun Fengyan's. Ling Han almost wanted to sleep upon hearing this. As he saw it, aside from the eldest imperial prince, who still had some future prospects, the other imperial princes were all mediocre. At most, they would only advance into the cauldron forging tier. Bi Xiao. Empress Ma suddenly changed the topic to Princess Bi Xiao. It has already been 2 years since you came to the imperial capital, right? That's right, Princess Bi Xiao said gently, though she could smack that noble lady who was seated high up in the main seat to death with a single wave of her hand. Empress Ma nodded and continued. Then after so much time has passed, you had best think carefully. Which imperial prince are you going to marry? Was this a forced marriage? When the demon race princess entered into the imperial capital, she had come with the mission of marriage. She was going to marry a certain imperial prince, but it was up to her to decide who she would marry. Now, Empress Ma was forcing her in public, forcing Princess Bi Xiao to make a choice. Everyone was paying attention, and the eldest imperial prince and the others all looked proud. A few of them were even looking at Ling Han with provoking eyes. What right do you think you have to sit here? It was to let you see the scene with your own eyes. No matter what choice Princess Bi Xiao made, it would still be benefiting them. She would marry an imperial prince, and would have no chance with Ling Han. Ling Han remained calm and collected. He wanted to see how Princess Bi Xiao would choose. Worst come to worst, he would reveal his identity as Chun Fengyan's uncle, and slap them one after another. Princess Bi Xiao smiled faintly, and said, Bi Xiao is presently prioritizing cultivating. Furthermore, after your imperial highnesses have advanced into celestial path, your lifespans would be at least in the thousands, so there is absolutely no need for you to be anxious. How could that be allowed? Empress Ma shook her head. As the saying goes, one should get married and start their career, and only after they have married would they be able to rest easy. Bi Xiao, could it be that you think that there is not a single imperial prince that is worthy of you? These words were very harsh. Empress Ma, you've gone too far with your words. A young man suddenly stood up. I think Lady Bi Xiao's words are reasonable. As cultivators, we should set aside our romantic affairs and pursue that supreme great Tao. His name was Zhu Sen, and he was an extraterrestrial visitor. He himself was an elite of the foundation building tier, and his grandfather was also a spirit transformation true lord. Thus, there was no need for him to revere Empress Ma. That's right. Another young man stood up, holding a wine cup in his hand, appearing extremely casual. Furthermore, the matter of marriage still has to depend on the wishes of both parties. What meaning is there to force them to be together? His name was Zhou Yang, and he was also an extraterrestrial visitor. His background wasn't inferior to Zhu Sen's. All the imperial princes were defeated. Empress Ma's expression was slightly ugly. She was using this banquet to force a marriage from Princess Bi Xiao, and was definitely going to force her to express her stand. She had not thought that 2 extraterrestrial visitors would actually interfere. What did this have to do with them? She knew that Zhu Sen and Zhou Yang had definitely taken a fancy to Princess Bi Xiao, and that was why they were speaking up for justice. However, there was nothing she could do. Their background was not the slightest bit inferior to hers, so what could she use to suppress them? Moreover, the celestial sea planet situation was very delicate at this moment. Although Chun Fengyan could withstand the pressure of the other 4 spirit transformation true lords, what about a few more? Thus, Empress Ma didn't dare to be stubborn and help Chun Fengyan make another powerful enemy. Her words were stifled, and she could not speak at all. When Imperial Consort Lu saw this, she hurriedly continued, All right, we'll talk about Bi Xiao later. Today is the Imperial Prince's big day. Come, let's drink. Congratulations, Imperial Princes, for leaping over the celestial gate and becoming foundation-building elites. Having stepped onto the celestial path, one can pursue the great Tao. This is the fortune of our empire. Everyone was bootlicking. However, those extraterrestrial visitors all looked disdainful. They were really a group of ignorant boors. Was it worth being so excited about having stepped onto the celestial path? On their planet, wouldn't it be a matter of course to become a foundation-building cultivator? With the background of spirit transformation tier level, it would be strange if they couldn't step onto the celestial path. Could not be helped. This planet had just awakened, so it was very normal for cultivation to be wilted. If it was not for the fact that the prison had been opened ahead of time, extraterrestrial visitors like them would be able to sweep aside all opposition and be invincible. The eldest imperial prince and the others were all glowing with happiness. Today was the day that they would reach the pinnacle of their lives. This was the celestial path, a height that they could only look up to in the past. Now that they had set foot, they would be able to reach the apex in the future. With a father who was a spirit transformation true lord, sheltering them from the elements and snatching opportunities for them, their future prospects would be limitless. I'm Zhou Yang, and I've just formed my Heavenly Tao Foundation. However, I'm willing to seal my cultivation level to Human Tao Foundation. I'd like to ask for some guidance from the Imperial Princes. A disharmonious voice suddenly said. The extraterrestrial visitor, Zhou Yang, stood up once more, provoking the eldest Imperial Prince and the others. Should they accept it or not? They definitely had to accept the challenge. The other party had already called them out, and he had also said that he would seal his cultivation level. If they still didn't dare to accept the challenge, what face would the imperial family have? The expressions of Empress Ma, Imperial Consort Lu and the others were all dark. These outsiders were really not giving them any face. Previously, they had spoken up for Princess Bixiao, and now they were issuing a challenge to the imperial princes. To publicly embarrass them like this was really going too far. However, he had a very powerful background, and it was not appropriate for the Dark North Nation to make any more powerful enemies, so they really could not afford to offend him. To say the least, even if they wanted to suppress him, there was nothing they could do. Zhou Yang was a Heavenly Tao Foundation elite, but how many elites were there in the imperial family? Could it be that he still had to ask the sects that had submitted to them to make a move? That would really be hilarious. The imperial family was really too weak. Thus, after the imperial princes exchanged looks, the 13th imperial prince was the first to step out and say, "Then please provide guidance." Zhou Yang showed a hint of mockery. "Please." The two of them exchanged blows, and in only 10 moves, the 13th prince was suppressed. "Young Master Zhou, what meaning is there to suppress others with your cultivation level?" a courtier said. He had received instructions from Empress Ma. Otherwise, how could a mere inscription tier cultivator like him dare to challenge a foundation-building elite? Zhou Yang did not speak, and merely sent out a palm strike towards the 10th imperial prince. Boom! A frightening power surged out, and the 10th imperial prince was completely unable to match it, and was instantly sent flying. This was his answer. You see, if I displayed the strength of Heavenly Tao Foundation, I would be as strong as this. Furthermore, he had made an example of the 10th imperial prince to display his true battle prowess. Just how much contempt was he showing? So what if they were from the imperial family? He was completely unafraid. You guys aren't Chun Fengyan. Everyone was rendered speechless. Indeed, Zhou Yang hadn't won the battle against the 13th prince with his cultivation level. Instead, it was because his battle prowess was far too powerful. "Allow me to spar with you," the 9th prince said as he walked over. His body was astonishingly sturdy, and it was as if he were a vicious bear. "Make your move," Zhou Yang said calmly. The 9th prince moved, yet he was defeated after only 10 exchanges. That made it 2 consecutive losses. The 7th imperial prince also stepped out and said, "Brother Zhou's strength is truly extraordinary. Let me spar with you." He was skilled in spiritual power, and after advancing into celestial path, this had been fully developed, making him confident that even against the eldest imperial prince, who was born with a divine physique, he would not lose. The 7th imperial prince moved. With a thought, innumerable short swords instantly shot out from his body, and shot towards Zhou Yang like a barrage of arrows. What a powerful spiritual power! Zhou Yang showed a hint of seriousness. The attacks of spiritual power elites were surprising, and could be delivered from any angle, catching others off guard. However, he was fearless. How strong could the battle prowess of a person from a place that was lagging behind in martial arts be? The 7th Imperial Prince was not too bad. At one point he had managed to exchange a few blows with Zhou Yang, but just when everyone was cheering for him, thinking that he could win back some face for the Dark North Nation, Zhou Yang suddenly exploded and defeated the 7th Imperial Prince in a few moves. Ling Han could see very clearly that the 7th Imperial Prince had actually lost because he did not have a good spiritual power spirit tool. If the 7th Imperial Prince possessed the heavenly pattern jade, it was guaranteed that Zhou Yang would be 100 times more troubled, and it would be difficult to say who would emerge victorious. But once the 7th Imperial Prince was defeated, aside from the eldest Imperial Prince, the other Imperial Princes all gave up any thoughts of making a move. They had competed internally before, and the 7th Imperial Prince's battle prowess was only inferior to the eldest Imperial Prince. All of a sudden, everyone's eyes were focused on the eldest Imperial Prince. The eldest Imperial Prince had no choice but to move. The pride of the Imperial family and the pride of the Dark North Nation were all on his shoulders. He had to defend this stage. However, he wasn't confident at all. His opponent was truly powerful, so much so that even with his innate divine physique, he had absolutely no chance of winning. The two of them battled, and it wasn't long before the eldest Imperial Prince unleashed his full power. He even activated his natural mystical power, causing countless shards of green light to descend from the sky. Their might was tremendous. This is mystical power? Zhou Yang knew what was good for him, and he said in surprise, I never thought that you would actually have an innate divine physique. Innate divine physiques were too rare. At least, he wasn't one of them. Even if the eldest Imperial Prince was only a 9th grade innate divine physique, he was still incredibly powerful. Once the mystical power was used, he instantly gained the upper hand. Everyone cheered loudly, finally regaining their momentum. However, the extraterrestrial visitors were all extremely calm. An innate divine physique was indeed powerful, but after advancing into celestial path, those who used divine stones to build their foundations were not the slightest bit weak. Some top-grade divine stones were even comparable to the 2nd-grade divine physiques. As expected, Zhou Yang very quickly began his counterattack and used a celestial technique. It was extraordinarily powerful and managed to block the eldest Imperial Prince's mystical power. The mystical power was indeed powerful, but it could not be channeled endlessly. This had a strong burden on the body and could only be used as a powerful move. Thus, once the eldest Imperial Prince's burst of power had passed, he immediately fell into a predicament of being on the back foot. Very soon he was defeated. At this point, the army of Imperial Princes was completely annihilated. A proud expression appeared on Zhou Yang's face, and he said, Is there any other Imperial Prince that wants to spar with me? Everyone was silent. Their skills were inferior, so it would only be more humiliating if they tried to put on airs. Ha ha ha! Those extraterrestrial visitors laughed loudly, filled with disdain. This primitive land could not even withstand a single blow. The faces of the ministers of the Dark North Nation were all burning hot. They were being slapped in the face like this in their own court. They couldn't bear it, but there was nothing that could be done. Who asked that the battle prowess of the Imperial Princes were indeed inferior? Was there anyone that could step out and deliver a harsh beating on these guys? How could it be that they could not find a single true prodigy in such a colossal planet and such a large country? It was a shame that Hong Tianbu had betrayed them. Otherwise, he would definitely have been able to turn the tide. A battle at the same cultivation level? Amidst this silence, a lazy voice rang out. Let me teach you a lesson. 9 battles, 9 victories. Someone still jumped out at this time. Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice, and their hearts all jolted. So it was this guy. The 2 prodigies of the imperial capital, aside from Hong Tianbu, there was also Ling Han. Faced with multiple pairs of eyes, Ling Han was still slowly eating, as if those bold words just now had not come from his mouth. Zhou Yang sneered, and said, "A mere mystery realm tier is worthy of fighting me?" Ling Han was unmoved and said calmly, "Come, suppress your cultivation level to the mystery realm tier. I will defeat you within 10 moves, and if I need one more move, I will make an exception and take you as my godson." Fuck, how could this guy be so mean? Zhou Yang couldn't help but fly into a rage. "Aunt, are you seeking death? Do you dare? Just say the word." Ling Han provoked. "I don't dare." Zhou Yang shook his head and said, "I'm just disdainful." Ling Han pondered for a moment before retrieving the heavenly pattern jade and shaking it. "I'll use it as a wager. Whoever can defeat me at the same cultivation level can take this item away. A spiritual power spirit tool. Heavenly pattern jade." Zhou Yang, Zhu San, and the others all exclaimed in shock, looking envious. They naturally knew what was what. Spiritual power spirit tools were extremely rare, so even though it was only 2-star material, they were still tempted. In fact, even elites of the core formation tier would treat them as treasures. "I'll go. I'll fight you. No, I'll go." Zhou Yang and the others were all in a rush to call out. They all wanted to exchange blows with Ling Han. How could a prodigy exist in a backward place like Celestial Sea Planet? Thus, whoever made the first move would be able to obtain the heavenly pattern jade. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "It's easy to challenge me. Show me a treasure of equal value." "Hold on, when did it become challenging you? Didn't you fucking jump out on your own volition?" However, the heavenly pattern jade was too valuable, so they had no time to bother about this. "I have a 300-year-old yellow ginseng here. It is very nutritious to the blood and qi, and can save one's life at crucial moments." Zhou Yang was the first to say. He took out a ginseng and placed it on the table. "All right, let's battle." Ling Han nodded. Zhou Yang walked over, suppressing his cultivation level as he did so. The celestial path aura immediately disappeared. Now he was only mystery realm tier level. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Those who want to challenge me, line up. You must bring out something good. If there is nothing good, I will not accept a challenge." "Fuck, you are really too conceited, aren't you? We haven't even fought, and you think that you have defeated Zhou Yang?" As the person involved, Zhou Yang was naturally the most furious. In this primitive place, someone actually dared to look down on him like this. He humphed. "How preposterous!" Zhou Yang leaped forwards with a single step, and he immediately charged toward Ling Han. He was already impatient, and he wanted to defeat Ling Han to avoid being annoyed. Facts talked louder than words. "I'll let you have the first 10 moves." Ling Han parried casually, only defending and not attacking. Zhou Yang didn't know Ling Han's strength, so he simply thought that Ling Han couldn't fight back at all. However, Ling Han was still stubbornly refusing to admit defeat. He humphed, and his attacks became even more rapid. After only a few moves, Ling Han was sure that Zhou Yang should be a 1-star genius. However, now that he had suppressed his cultivation level to the mystery realm tier, Zhou Yang's battle prowess was close to 2 stars, which was very extraordinary. It was no wonder that he could defeat all the imperial princes. Even the eldest imperial prince, who was born with a divine physique, was no match for him. A 1-star genius was indeed very strong, and added with the fact that he had grasped a profound celestial technique, even the eldest imperial prince was no match for him. Seeing that Ling Han was only defending and not attacking, everyone also felt that it was normal. He was an extraterrestrial visitor. Didn't he see that even the eldest imperial prince and the others had been defeated? Then what was so strange about Ling Han being outmatched? However, you were so high profile just now, and now you have been slapped in the face. Doesn't that hurt? This was also a humiliation to the Dark North Nation. If Ling Han unleashed his might, he would be able to insta-kill Zhou Yang with a single move. However, if he did that, who would dare make a bet with him? Wouldn't that mean that there was no profit to be earned? Thus, Ling Han's action was naturally a long-term plan to catch a big fish. If the 7 babies were here with their understanding of Ling Han, they would definitely have long since known that Ling Han had begun to play tricks. After several hundred exchanges, Ling Han finally started to unleash his might, defeating Zhou Yang with a slight advantage. Thanks. Ling Han walked over and picked up the 300-year-old yellow ginseng. He then wore an arrogant expression as he said, "Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else who can fight? What extraterrestrial visitor? He can't even withstand a single blow." Hearing these words, Zhu San and the others were all enraged. This brat was really too arrogant, wasn't he? He had only narrowly defeated Zhou Yang with a single move, and that was completely luck. What was there to be proud of? Everyone step aside. I'll deal with this brat. A man in black walked out. He took out a piece of green metal and placed it on the table. This is 1-star material, tragic green metal. Is it enough? 1-star ingredients naturally couldn't compare to 2-star ingredients. Moreover, the heavenly pattern jade was a spiritual power spirit tool at that, which was far more valuable than ordinary 2-star ingredients. Ling Han didn't mind. In any case, it was just earning some extra income. Not enough, but it doesn't matter. In any case, you will definitely lose, Ling Han said challengingly. You are really quite arrogant. The man in black rushed over and launched a fierce offensive. Ling Han was still the same as before. He didn't win with a single strike. Instead, he continued to battle with his opponent, giving the others the illusion that their strength was more or less equal. After several hundred exchanges like this, Ling Han finally strengthened his offensive, defeating the man in black. 2 consecutive wins. This time, everyone had a whole new respect for Ling Han. In terms of the first battle, Ling Han had only been lucky. The 2 consecutive wins were enough to prove that was not the case. This was not a stroke of luck. Ling Han put away the tragic green metal as well. Sigh. Can't you send out a decent opponent? Sigh, they're not even enough for me to fight. This was too arrogant, too arrogant. You're nothing but a pawn from a backward place. Where do you get such arrogance from? Another extraterrestrial visitor stepped out. He put down an alchemical pill. This is the 3 transformations pill, a pseudo 1-star alchemical pill. It can stimulate the evolution of level of being and is greatly beneficial to you. Ling Han couldn't help but feel disappointed. Although the effects of the 3 transformations pill were what he needed, he had already ingested the 5 elements karmic pill. There was actually no meaning to ingesting an alchemical pill with a similar effect. Otherwise, wouldn't it be better to concoct 2 5 elements karmic pills? Forget it. If he didn't use it himself, he could give it to others. Barely. Ling Han waved his hand. Fuck. You're starting to look down on me? Come battle. The battle began, and Ling Han still followed the old rules. He dragged out the battle for 300 moves before finally defeating his opponent. 3 consecutive wins. Ling Han became more and more arrogant. To him, attracting animosity was really too easy. He only needed to act as he was. One after another, extraterrestrial visitors leaped out. They could not bear this provocation. It was too infuriating. 1 person came and 1 person lost. There was no one that could defeat Ling Han. 9 battles, 9 victories. This time, those extraterrestrial visitors were all dumbfounded. 9 battles, 9 victories. Though they had all barely won, it was enough to illustrate the problem. Ling Han was very, very strong, though he was very arrogant, causing others to grit their teeth in hatred. Anyone else? Ling Han said with a smile. He swept his gaze around, but no one answered. Now, everyone had to consider whether they were stronger than the previous 9 people. Otherwise, if they went up, they would only be delivering a defeat and be humiliated in vain. I'll go. After a long time, Zhu Sen walked out. Just a single punch, this should be the last one. Ling Han sighed internally. No one was an idiot, especially those extraterrestrial visitors that had been sent here. All of them were descendants of their clans, the prized sons of their sex, and all of them were extremely intelligent. He had fought 9 battles and claimed 9 victories. Though these were all very difficult victories, they would still be seen through, pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, and deliberately setting a trap. There's only one? Ling Han deliberately looked around. I don't mind if you guys have a few more. 5 then. How about all of you attack together? No one answered. 10? Ling Han relaxed the conditions again. I'll fight 10 by myself. If I lose, you guys leave the treasures behind. If you win, you can take the heavenly pattern jade. Instantly, a few people were itching to give it a try, but in the end, no one responded. Sigh, what a bunch of cowards. They were scared just like that. Even with 10 of you, you wouldn't dare. I really overestimated you guys. Ling Han shook his head, his expression filled with mockery. Seeing how arrogant he was, while the extraterrestrial visitors almost exploded in anger, the people from the Dark North Nation were all indescribably excited. This was what it meant to be fucking proud. Sure enough, the title of the twin prodigies of the imperial capital wasn't for nothing. It was fine even if Hong Tianbu left. They still had Ling Han, who could sweep aside all opponents at the same cultivation level. However, the expressions of Empress Ma, the other consorts, the eldest imperial prince and the others were all extremely unfriendly. The enmity between them and Ling Han had become very serious, so they naturally could not bear to see Ling Han act so mighty. It was fine whoever could redeem the pride of the Dark North Nation for Ling Han, but it definitely couldn't be Ling Han. Instead of having him redeem the pride of the Dark North Nation, it would be better to lose face. Brat, you still haven't defeated me yet, Zhu Sun said calmly. He was filled with confidence in himself. If Ling Han's abilities were the same as what he had previously displayed, his chances of victory were assured. Ling Han crooked a finger. Zhu Sun took out a 1-star celestial medicine. He was quite satisfied with that. After advancing into celestial path, he would begin concocting celestial pills, and naturally needed celestial medicines as the main ingredient. Brat, you are too arrogant. He's just lucky and won by a narrow margin. What's there to be proud of? If Brother Zhu makes a move, you will definitely lose. The extraterrestrial visitors all called out. Originally, there had not been any relations between them, but now, they were united against a common enemy. Zhu San was brimming with confidence as he strode toward Ling Han. Boom! Fiery flames erupted from his body, and it was as if they were heaven-reaching flames. Ling Han was stunned for a moment. If he used spiritual power to communicate with high-level energy, it would only be able to entwine the high-level energy around his hands and feet. At most, he would still have the opened apertures, so mystical power would be released from the apertures, and his whole person would be like a porcupine. The current Zhu San was completely different. His whole person was wrapped in flames, yet did not hurt him in the slightest. Realization dawned on him. Zhu San was an innate divine physique. Mystical power of flames, Ling Han said with a smile. Zhu San said proudly, I am an 8th grade divine physique. Even though it was only 8th grade, the innate divine physique was extremely rare. Even if only a 9th grade divine physique appeared, it would still alert the heaven and earth. Thunder would rumble, and an 8th grade innate divine physique would definitely be even more powerful. No wonder he dared to step out and issue a challenge even though he clearly knew that Ling Han was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The innate divine physique was stronger when encountering others. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, So what if you have an innate divine physique? I can defeat you with a single punch. Arrogant, Zhu Sun said with a cold chuckle. He leaped over like a god of flames. Ling Han was finally getting serious. Boom! The apertures of a complete cycle lit up at the same time, forming a screen of light around him. Then, he threw a punch at Zhu Senator with his current strength. He had already used a mystical power, so what need was there for him to use other techniques? The flames surged over, yet they were completely unable to penetrate the starlight screen. However, Ling Han's fist was unstoppable, and a terrifying power surged. Pong! It was like a great mountain was crushing down, penetrating Zhu Sen's defenses and striking his chest. Then Zhu Sun was sent flying. Ah! Zhu Sen roared in fury. His body was in midair, but a terrifying aura was surging within his body. That was the celestial path-level oppressive might that could crush mortals. He released the suppression of his cultivation level and became an elite of Heavenly Tao Foundation again. This was too despicable. A native from a backward place had actually sent him flying with a single punch. Humiliating, this was too humiliating. There was complete silence. Though everyone had already guessed that Ling Han had been screwing others over all this while, deliberately making it seem as if he was locked in a stalemate with his opponent, and his motive was to trick them into making a bet with him, they had never imagined that once he went all out, Ling Han would be as strong as this. An 8th grade innate divine physique. Moreover, he had used the mystical power, yet he had actually been sent flying with a single punch. If Zhu Sun had not released his foundation-building cultivation level in time, this punch would have been enough to half-kill him. He was too strong. How could there be such a powerful mystery realm tier? If Ling Han advanced into Celestial Path, just how powerful would he be? That's right. There were indeed a great many prodigies that had disappeared among the masses after leaping over the Celestial Gate, but there were a great many prodigies that had maintained their standards and continued to be freakish. And with Ling Han's present standards, even if he had been slightly weaker when leaping over the Celestial Gate, half of a 100-feet tall tree was still much taller than a 10-feet tall tree. This kind of freak, just the thought of it was terrifying. He should just kill him to get rid of future trouble. All of a sudden, practically all the extraterrestrial visitors were filled with killing intent, as they all stared at Ling Han. Princess Bixiao was extremely anxious. Though her battle prowess was extraordinary, she would only be able to block 1 or 2 cultivators of the same cultivation level, at most. After advancing into Celestial Path, the gap among prodigies had actually shrunk. Furthermore, among these extraterrestrial visitors, which one of them was mediocre? Meanwhile, the imperial princes all smiled slightly. It was not appropriate for them to make a move on Ling Han, but there was no rule that stated that if others made a move on Ling Han, they would still have to step out and resolve the matter. This kind of prodigy that would steal their limelight. They didn't care. In any case, their old man was a spirit transformation true lord, so how could it be that the Dark North nation needed a mystery realm tier to support it? Ling Han stood proudly, a faint smile on his face, appearing extremely calm. He wasn't confident in his own strength, but he was confident that Chun Fengyan definitely wouldn't allow outsiders to behave atrociously in the imperial capital. Moreover, he was his uncle. As expected, the great formation of the imperial capital was activated. A light figure took human form and said calmly, "Cultivators of Celestial Path are not allowed to make a move on mortals. Anyone who disobeys will be killed." His voice wasn't loud, yet it was filled with a domineering aura. Even heaven and earth had to obey his commands. Zhu Sun was just about to attack, yet he forcefully suppressed his urge. This shadowy figure was far too powerful, so much so that even he felt apprehensive. Formation spirit? No, it wasn't that simple. It should be a combination of a formation spirit and the will of a spirit transformation true lord. "Greetings, true Lord Chun." The extraterrestrial visitors all clasped their hands in greeting, their expressions solemn. This was a spirit transformation true lord, and even in the universe, this was considered a great elite. Who dared to disrespect him? This wasn't something like Empress Ma, only someone related to Chun Fengyan. Instead, it was a true lord that was manifesting his intent, and it was as if they were facing Chun Fengyan. The shadowy figure raised a hand. "You all have come to search for fated opportunities. I have the capacity to accommodate the whole world, and will not do anything to you, but if you harm my citizens, I will not spare you." Yes, the extraterrestrial visitors all obeyed. No one dared to talk back to a spirit transformation true lord. That would be courting death. Envoy from the Holy Land. After the light person finished speaking, his body turned into bits of light that disappeared without a trace. What was this Chun Fengyan doing all day? Why did he always send his doppelganger or mental projection to do things? It was almost impossible to see his true self. Could it be that he was about to break through to the 4th pinnacle level and wanted to become a great elite of sect master level? It was possible. Thus, he was very tolerant now because as long as he became a sect master level, how could the likes of the primordial true lord and others be able to withstand a single strike from him? The conflict that was about to happen was resolved, but the atmosphere could no longer go back to how it had once been. The extraterrestrial visitors all had ugly expressions. They were actually suppressed by a mystery realm tier, which made them feel suffocated. But in a battle of equal cultivation levels, they were really no match. Humph! What's the point of a mystery realm tier being invincible among his peers? That's right. When they leaped over the celestial gate, how many prodigies had died? You can only show off a little now. After he advances into the celestial path, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, I will be able to kill him easily. Foundation building tier is the starting point of cultivation. It's completely meaningless to compare to the mortal level. Not long after, these extraterrestrial visitors all became excited on their own, and belittled Ling Han without caring about the facts. This was very infuriating. They were clearly outmatched in a battle of equal cultivation levels, yet still turned around to mock him. Ling Han didn't say anything. He simply retrieved the treasures that he had just won and placed them on the table. Instantly, those extraterrestrial visitors were rendered speechless. These stakes were their humiliation, and also Ling Han's battle merits. What else could they say? The banquet continued, but everyone lost interest. The extraterrestrial visitors all hoped that the banquet would end quickly, so that they could leave, while the subjects of the Dark North Nation were discussing Ling Han spiritedly. As expected, His Majesty still thought very highly of this young prodigy. Should they find a chance to stuff some women of marriageable age into the Foreign Affairs Department? The main characters of this banquet were obviously the eldest imperial prince and the others, but now, everyone was thinking of Ling Han. It was just that different people had different feelings. Empress Ma saw this, and also felt that it was meaningless for the banquet to continue. She stood up, and was just about to announce the end of the banquet. However, right at this moment, boom! A meteor suddenly streaked across the sky. It looked so familiar. Not good. It was the little lowly Tang Yuner, who had crashed over with the shuttle. Ling Han was just about to use the imminent skyline to leave, when he discovered that the meteor had actually braked abruptly, and stopped in midair in an incredibly bizarre manner. It was only about 30 meters above their heads. It wasn't Tang Yuner. Ling Han thought to himself. Firstly, the little lowly didn't have such good skills that she could stop just like that. Secondly, the shuttle looked different. Very good. With so many people here, it can also save me a lot of time. A voice was heard from within the shuttle. I am an envoy from the Holy Land of Metal Element, and have especially come for the Metal Element fruit gathering that is held in a year's time. Holy Land of Metal Element. Metal Element fruit gathering. All of a sudden, the extraterrestrial visitors became incredibly excited. They naturally knew what the words Holy Land of Metal Element represented. A holy land, only those forces that had produced saints would be qualified to be called a holy land. The shuttle slowly stopped, and a middle-aged man walked out from within. His expression was extraordinarily proud. Thinking about it, it made sense. Coming from a force of saint level, it was understandable that he was extremely proud. Greetings, Reincarnates. The extraterrestrial visitors all bowed in greeting, their faces all smiles. Seeing their expressions, no matter how stupid the people from the Dark North Nation were, they knew that the Holy Land of Metal Element was extremely awesome, and this Metal Element fruit gathering was probably also extremely grand, and they would be able to obtain great benefits. The middle-aged man wore a reserved expression. Although he was only at the foundation building tier with his background, even elites at the core formation tier would treat him with utmost respect. He was very pleased with the treatment he was receiving, yet deliberately kept a straight face and said calmly, I have been commanded to come here to find prodigies, and bestow them the qualifications to participate in the Metal Element fruit gathering. I had not thought that there would be so many prodigies in this declining land. Lord, you may not know, but I am not from the Celestial Sea planet. I am from the Flying Rain sect of the Crimson Alchemy planet. I'm from the 9 Sinking sect of Setting Sun planet. Everyone introduced themselves one after another. They hurriedly drew a clear dividing line between themselves and the Celestial Sea planet. They had no wish to be thought of as natives of a backward place. So that's how it is. The middle-aged man nodded. His name was Wan Zipping, and after being sucked up to like crazy, he naturally announced his name. Being called Lord Wan repeatedly, he felt even more pleased. Never mind. I am commanded to search for prodigies. I don't care about background, as long as they are talented enough. Come, everyone, step forwards one by one. As long as you place your hand on the shuttle, this spirit tool will automatically judge whether you are qualified to go to the Holy Land of Metal Element. He was a little overbearing, but the Holy Land and fruit gathering that he had thrown out had struck them dizzy. Even Empress Ma and the eldest imperial prince did not step forwards to stop him. Instead, they first sent someone to investigate the situation. After learning of the background of the Holy Land of Metal Element, they all inhaled sharply. Saint, what kind of lofty existence was this? There was no need for him to make a move at all. A single thought was enough to make the celestial sea planet crumble. Of course, having a saint appear and having a saint present were two completely different matters. However, even if the Holy Land of Metal Element no longer had saints, who could compare to their background? There was definitely a saint tool suppressing the Holy Land, and even if a Venerate tier cultivator went, they would only be seeking death. Everyone obediently queued up. Not one of them dared to shout loudly, fearing that they would be disqualified. Those below Celestial Path don't have to join in on the excitement, Juan Zipping said. He pulled a person out of the group, his expression filled with disdain. What, the lowest requirement to qualify was Foundation Building Tier. This was enough to eliminate 99% of the people here. Meanwhile, the extraterrestrial visitors all wore cold smirks. What kind of place did he think the Holy Land of Metal Element was? Did he think that just anyone had the right to go there? Quite a number of people's eyes flew towards Ling Han. So what if you are freakish? Without reaching the Foundation Building Tier, one wouldn't even be qualified to undergo the test. Ha ha. He could only watch wide-eyed as the great opportunity flew away. He must be feeling very terrible. The test was in progress, and those who passed would be enshrouded by a ray of light, which would leave behind a mark. This was the qualification for participation in the Metal Element Fruit Gathering. Those who had passed naturally looked pleased, while those who had not looked livid. Judging by the current situation, if one wanted to pass, they would have to be a one-star genius. Princess Bixiao walked over, curtsied to Juan Zipping and said, Bixiao pays respects to Lord Juan. Juan Zipping's eyes involuntarily lit up. This kind of beauty was really rare. Even in the Holy Daughter, merely in terms of beauty, she could be ranked among the Holy Daughters. He couldn't help but become gentle and asked, What is it? Bixiao earnestly requests for an exception. Lord? Princess Bixiao said. She pointed at Ling Han and continued, This is Ling Han and he's currently Mystery Realm tier, and he's invincible against those at the same cultivation level. Moreover, he's only a step away from reaching the Celestial Path. 1 year is enough for him to reach the Foundation Building Tier. You want me to make an exception for him and grant him the right? Juan Zipping asked. Yes. Princess Bixiao curtsied. Juan Zipping couldn't help but laugh loudly. A mere backward place, and someone actually dares to boast that he is invincible among his peers? Rules are rules. Without reaching the Foundation Building Tier, what right do you have to go to the Holy Land? Another way, that's right. What right does a mere Mystery Realm tier have to be on the same level as us? Zhou Yang and the others immediately began to mock and ridicule him. The few people who had lost to Ling Han were all one-star geniuses. They all passed the test and obtained a spot. This comparison was very stark. They had stood out from the rest, but Ling Han was not even qualified to take part in the test. Princess Bixiao still wanted to say something, yet Juan Zipping waved her off, expressing clear refusal. Ling Han walked over, smiled and said, No need to waste your breath on him. But the Metal Element Fruit Gathering is really very important, Princess Bixiao said anxiously. Don't be rash. I've asked around just now, and the Holy Land of Metal Element will hold a Metal Element Fruit Gathering every 20 years. Not only will supreme celestial techniques be taught, but there will also be celestial fruits that the Holy Land of Metal Element has been keeping in their treasure chamber. If you can attend the Metal Element Fruit Gathering, it would be enough to save you 100 years, or even several hundred years of cultivation time. Ling Han cracked a smile. I didn't say I wasn't going. Princess Bixiao was stunned. You're not even qualified to participate in the test. So how are you supposed to go? Don't worry. We don't necessarily need to depend on him to go to the holy land of metal element. Linghan smiled and said, "All right, don't worry about my matters. It's like you are my wife. You still have a glib tongue." Princess Bixiao stomped her feet in anger. Everyone was tested, one after another, and even the eldest imperial prince and the others were no exception. Holy land. What kind of place was that? However, the eldest imperial prince passed, the seventh imperial prince also passed, and the other imperial princes were mercilessly dismissed. 3 days later, head to these coordinates. The Holy Land will activate a large-scale formation to teleport all of you over, Wan Zipping said, announcing a set of coordinates. Then he sneered, "Those who have not passed the test need not waste time. There are no marks on your bodies. After the formation is activated, you will be crushed to death. I'll only say it once. If you guys don't believe me, you're courting death. I still have to find other prodigies. I'm leaving." Wan Zipping once again entered into the shuttle. He tore through the air and left. Ha 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 ha. The extraterrestrial visitors laughed loudly. They had practically all passed the test, and those that could be sent here were naturally prodigy level. As they looked at Ling Han, their expressions were filled with mockery. What use would it be if you were invincible in Mystery Realm tier? Weren't you very arrogant just now? Now just try and continue acting arrogant. Ling Han looked at them coldly, and there was only one saying in his mind. Vile characters who have attained success. He naturally had to attend the metal element fruit gathering. However, he wouldn't go through Wan Zipping. Instead, he would go directly. 1 year's time was enough for him to advance into Celestial Path and directly explode on the planet of the Holy Land of Metal Element. How could such a prodigy not be extended an olive branch to the Holy Land of Metal Element? Heh! When the time comes, I'll still beat you guys until you call me Grandpa. Zhou Yang and the others all prepared to set out. The eldest and the seventh imperial princes did the same. This was a Holu land. If they could cultivate a saint-level technique, then even if they couldn't become saints in the future, what about venerate tier, sect master, and so on? They could at least aspire to that. This temptation was too great, and no one could resist. They all moved out, fearing that they would be delayed by something. If they could not go to the Holy Land of Metal Element, wouldn't that be a great loss? Princess Bixiao naturally passed the test as well, and received a place. She and Ling Han returned to the Foreign Affairs Department, and did not speak on their way back. She was still angry at Ling Han for missing out on such a great opportunity. Ling Han merely smiled. Even if he really missed this opportunity, he would not feel much heartache either, because he had even obtained the origin gold. That was something that even saints would be envious of. And going to a great planet like the Holy Land of Metal Element, there should be heavenly Tao flames, right? He could use this opportunity to refine the imperial weapon. On the second day, Princess Bixiao set out. Time was limited and she had to hurry. "Without me here, you must be careful," she warned. "The second and the third imperial princes are all in foundation building tier. You are no match for them, so you must not act rashly." All right, I'm not an idiot," Ling Han said with a smile. Princess Bixiao gave him some more instructions before leaving. A few days later, news came. Wan Zipping had already left the Celestial Sea Planet and gone to other planets. He had also gone to the Primordial Sect, the Nine Spirit Sect, and the other Great Spirit Transformation True Lord level sects, issuing some entry slots. Including Hong Tianbu, the few prodigies that could be counted had all left Celestial Sea Planet. They were directly brought to the Holy Land of Metal Element by a large formation. The galaxy projection could transmigrate through space. This was a saint's technique. The Celestial Sea Planet instantly fell silent. The numerous prodigies left one after another, causing this newly revived planet to lose a great deal of its vitality. Ling Han stayed true to his heart. He cultivated diligently every day, and on the other hand, he was also searching for pill recipes above Celestial Path. Once he had stepped onto the Celestial Path, he would begin concocting celestial pills to assist in martial arts. The Celestial Sea Planet's path of cultivation had been severed before, and even if heaven and earth revived now, most of the information had already been destroyed. What Ling Han could find was considerably limited. He hadn't found the pill recipes, but he had obtained an ancient book that was related to alchemy. It introduced celestial medicines. This was quite useful. If he didn't even know how to recognize herbs, how could he concoct alchemical pills? This book introduced the medicinal effects of various celestial medicines, which clashed with certain attributes of celestial medicines, how they merged, and about the environment of their growth, whether these celestial medicines preferred a cold or warm environment, and so on. It was very comprehensive. Ling Han was enthralled, and he was already deducing in his mind which medicinal ingredients he should combine with which medicinal ingredients and what effects they could produce. Of course, he would never forget his daily cultivation when the sun rose. Now that the apertures all over his body had opened when he was cultivating, absorbing the power of heaven and earth together would greatly increase his cultivation speed. The number of apertures that an enlightenment tier cultivator opened was directly related to the future prospects of a cultivator. Even if Ling Han didn't have any special cultivation technique, his cultivation speed was still several times faster than the normal Mystery Realm tier. Combined with Brother Monkey cultivation technique and the supplementary cultivation technique, his cultivation speed could be dozens or even hundreds of times faster than others. Every few days, he would be able to welcome an upgrade to his level of being, unlocking a few shackles. 2 months later, Ling Han calculated that he still had 78 shackles that he had yet to shatter. This result was extremely shocking. One had to realize that ordinary Mystery Realm tiers would only be able to unlock 10% of the shackles on their bodies at most. The potential of this was imaginable. At most, they would only be able to advance to the foundation building tier and would not have the power to advance any further. Only prodigies could unlock more than half of the shackles, but reaching 90% could practically be considered a flawless physique. And in Ling Han's case, the shackles he had unlocked had already surpassed 99%. Looking at the world, there were probably not many that could compare to him, but he naturally would not be satisfied just like that. He had to pursue absolute perfection. However, the fewer the remaining shackles, the slower the improvement of this level of being would be. Previously, it could be unlocked once every 6 to 7 days, and now it would need half a month. Going by this calculation, even though there were only 78 shackles left, it was very likely that he would need 7 to 8 years to break through them. This was like how the difficulty of raising one's score from 0 to 1 point could not be compared with the difficulty of raising one's score from 99 to 100. The further one progressed, the slower their progress would be. Ling Han believed that he would definitely be able to break through all the shackles in his body, but this time was too long. Right at this moment, the imperial family released a huge piece of news. Obtaining a spot by defeating Ling Han, the cleansing pool was about to open. What was the cleansing pool? This was an extremely great opportunity for mortal tier cultivators. It could provide them with astonishing energy, helping the cultivator to activate the evolution of the level of being. Every planet had a cleansing pool, and the difference was that the higher the level of the planet, the better the effects of the cleansing pool. However, the effects of the celestial sea planet's cleansing pool would definitely not be inferior to the other great planets. Why? This was because the cleansing pool of other planets would open once every 10 years after accumulating energy. However, how much energy had the celestial sea planet's cleansing pool accumulated this time? More than 2,000 years. 2,000 years couldn't compare to 10 years of savings? Of course, not everyone could enter into the cleansing pool. First, one had to reach the Mystery Realm tier. Otherwise, when the majestic energy surged into the body would not be able to bear it at all, and would directly explode. And even if one had advanced into the Mystery Realm tier, they would still have to use their abilities to earn the right to enter the cleansing pool. After all, there was a limit to the energy in the cleansing pool. Once there were too many people, no one would be able to get much. Chun Fengyan had appeared long ago, and he had planned for many years. This was evident from the fact that he had built the imperial capital here. He already had a plan in mind. Thus, something as valuable as the cleansing pool was naturally under the control of Chun Fengyan. After all, he had once been the crown prince of this planet, so what did he not know? However, one of the 10 spots had already been directly assigned to Ling Han. No one was unconvinced. Ling Han's strength had come from battle, and this was publicly acknowledged. Thus, everyone set their eyes on the remaining 9 spots, and began a martial arts tournament. The tournament continued for 7 days, and just when the top 9 were about to be decided, another shocking piece of news spread out. The 4 spirit transformation true lords came together to ask Chen Fengyan to leave 2 spots for each of their forces. The cleansing pool could only accommodate 10 people, and now 8 were being sent by the 4 great true lords. So wouldn't there only be 2 spots left for the Dark North Nation? Everyone was naturally unconvinced. This was the wealth of the Dark North Nation, so what right did they have to take it out to share? However, none of them could interfere. Only a spirit transformation true lord was qualified to make a decision. Ling Han didn't know what Chen Fengyan and the others were discussing. In any case, the 5 true lords had reached a consensus to battle. The most important thing for cultivators was naturally their abilities. This was very normal. However, the people fighting this time wasn't Chen Fengyan and the others, but rather the Mystery Realm tiers. Chen Fengyan had announced that if they wanted to enter into the cleansing pool, they could do so. They only had to defeat Ling Han. If they defeated him once, 1 person could enter, and if they defeated him 10 times, 10 people could enter. When Ling Han found out, he was naturally unconcerned. He was invincible among his peers, and could do as he liked. Since Chen Fengyan had already made his decision, the 4 true lords had no choice but to accept. This was because Chen Fengyan had already said that the cleansing pool was only reserved for the most outstanding youths. If they couldn't even defeat Ling Han, it would be a waste even if they entered. Ling Han was depressed. He was clearly invincible in Mystery Realm tier. Why did he seem to have become a benchmark for judging strength? Was there really a Mystery Realm tier that could defeat him in this world? To say nothing of defeat, was there anyone that could fight him to a tie? However, he was on opposing sides from the 4 true lords. Moreover, he was Chen Fengyan's subject, so he had to support him at this moment. It wasn't long before the 4 true lords each sent 10 young prodigies into the imperial capital. They were all Mystery Realm tiers. Ling Han, on the other hand, was a little surprised. So many Mystery Realm tier prodigies? He did not believe that it was so coincidental. No one had managed to advance into Celestial Path before Wan Zipping had arrived. They must have deliberately suppressed their cultivation level, wanting to wait for this great opportunity of the cleansing pool. The 4 great elites had been trapped on the Celestial Sea Planet for over 2,000 years, so they definitely had a good understanding of the Celestial Sea Planet. If they wanted a battle, so be it. Who would be afraid of who? 3 days later, the great battle began, and innumerable spectators watched. Ling Han leaped onto the martial arts ring and said directly, "There's no need to compete one by one. Come on up onto the martial arts ring. I'm in a hurry. After I defeat all of you, I'll go back and eat." Those Mystery Realm tiers were all enraged. "You're too arrogant, aren't you? So condescending." They were all prodigies, so it would only be them that would ask others to attack them together. Ling Han cracked a smile. "Still reserved? All right, then I'll do it." He leaped out and began to attack those 40 people. Pong! 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 In just 3 punches, he had sent 7 people flying, showing his invincible bearing. Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! The spectators were all shouting loudly. Their emotions instantly ignited, and they became incredibly crazy. "This brat is practically a freak. How could he be so strong? Let's work together. Let's work together to deal with him." The remaining 30 or so people hurriedly gathered together. Members of their own sects stood together, forming 3 small teams that launched a counterattack against Ling Han. However, what use was this? Ling Han's strength in Mystery Realm tier had reached the extent of crushing all his peers. There was no need for him to use his full strength at all. With a punch, someone would definitely be sent flying, losing their battle prowess. The entire process took less than a minute. Aside from Ling Han, only 4 other people were still standing. Previously, they had not made a move, not because they had been frightened, but rather in disdain. All of them had crossed their arms over their chests, appearing to be extremely arrogant. "A bunch of weaklings indeed do not have the right to enjoy the cleansing pool," a white-robed man said. His eyes were like lightning, and his aura began to surge out in an incredibly powerful manner. Hee, it's good to have fewer people. We can gain more benefits, another young man in blue said with a smile. He was a little sloppy, but there was no denying his strength. Agreed, the only woman in red said. She was as beautiful as peach blossoms and indescribably charming, but she was definitely not just a pretty face. However, let's deal with this brat first, the last black-robed man said, pointing at Ling Han. All right. The white-robed man and the others nodded at the same time. Who's going? The woman in red asked. I, the black-robed man said with a smile and strode out. Pong! With a flash, the black-robed man had disappeared, and in his place, Ling Han was standing where he had been just now. He was sent flying. In the distance, the black-robed man was hanging from a large tree. His limbs were drooping, as if all the bones in his body had been broken. Ling Han exercised his muscles and bones, and asked calmly, "What did you guys say again?" The red-clothed woman and the others were all astounded. This was a fucking monster. With a single crash, he had caused him to lose all his battle prowess. This speed, this physique, this was completely inhuman. You! Ling Han pointed at the white-robed man. Using the imminent skyline, he had already crashed into the white-robed man. The white-robed man was also sent flying. After drawing an arc in the air, he fell onto the ground with a paw, already unconscious. The woman in red and the young man in blue couldn't help but take a few steps back involuntarily. Ling Han's attack could be said to be extremely simple. It was just a collision and they could take it head-on with speed and physique, but sometimes the simpler the attack, the more unsolvable it was. What could they do? The two of them hurriedly ignited their battle prowess completely. High-level energy entwined around their hands, and the apertures all over their bodies were also releasing mystical power, which was similarly enshrouded in high-level energy. They refused to believe that Ling Han would still dare to face them head-on. Pong! In the next instant, the red-clothed woman was also sent flying. Cleansing pool. The young man in blue looked at Ling Han as if he was looking at a monster. Ling Han's body was enveloped by the starlight screen. This awakened mystical power possessed astonishing defenses. Even though the woman in red had tried her best just then, she still hadn't been able to break through his defenses. She had been sent flying. The young man in blue was about to go crazy. How could there be such a freakish person? He was invincible just by charging around like a bull. He hurriedly spread out his body, thinking, if I was in a state of high-speed movement, how would you be able to crash into me? Show. His speed was extremely fast, and at close to 7 times the speed of sound, the whole martial arts arena was filled with sonic booms, like endless thunder. Yet Ling Han had absolutely no intention of making a move. He drew out a chair and sat down, as he munched on sunflower seeds. Fuck! Do you think I'm a sideshow? The young man in blue exploded in fury, yet did not dare slow down in the slightest. He had already witnessed the explosive speed and impact of Ling Han's attacks. Ling Han was definitely not someone that he could contend against. But why don't you make your move? The blue-robed young man felt extremely terrible. He was running around like an idiot, but his opponent was just sitting there as if he was watching a show. In comparison, wasn't he like a clown? On the spectators' seats, the spectators were also stunned, their expressions strange. The previous battle had ended too quickly. Ling Han was invincible, sending one person or even a few people flying with a single punch. Under his collision, even stronger prodigies could only lose in grievance, which made them feel very satisfied. It was too fast, and they had not managed to catch sight of it and could not recall it. But now, the battle had dragged on, but it was really too boring. Just to watch a person run off like he was in heat. Fight! Someone shouted. Hurry up and make your move. Aren't you very strong? Hurry up and make your move. Many people shouted at the blue-robed young man. The young man in blue roamed around for a while longer. He knew that he could not drag things on like this. Ling Han remained silent, not expending the slightest bit of energy. If this continued, it would definitely be disadvantageous to him. He raised his hand and delivered a palm strike, which transformed into a gust of energy that slashed towards Ling Han. Ling Han cracked a smile. Finally know to make your move? He launched a counterattack. As he threw a punch, the apertures all over his body shot out bursts of energy that blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they shot towards the young man in blue. The young man in blue greeted the attack, but it was only a flash of energy, and he was shaken to the point that his whole body was trembling violently. He couldn't help but feel stunned. With his strength, it was actually so difficult for him to take on one of the energy released from Ling Han's apertures. Just what kind of colossal power gap was this? Ling Han moved. His speed was even faster, and no matter how the young man in blue dodged, it was useless. Very soon, Ling Han caught up to him and sent him flying with a punch. At this point, all the challengers had been defeated. The spectators were all cheering. This was their Imperial City's twin prodigies. No, there were no more twin prodigies now. There was only the one and only prodigy, Ling Han. Ling Han smiled at his surroundings before turning around to leave. This kind of battle merit was indeed impressive, but in his eyes it was only so. What he pursued was the strongest. Being invincible in Mystery Realm tier did not mean anything. He was anticipating the cleansing pool that would be opening in a few days. The 4 spirit transformation true lords left helplessly. They were people who cared about their pride. Chun Fengyan had given them a chance to compete fairly, but their disciples were incompetent, so who could they blame? Peace had temporarily returned to the imperial capital, and Ling Han had been adjusting his condition these few days, reaching his peak. For days later, the cleansing pool opened. This was actually within the range of the imperial palace. It was located underground, and after Ling Han and the other 9 Mystery Realm tier entered the imperial palace, they arrived at the foot of a mountain and entered a cave. They walked all the way downwards, and after walking for a long time, the path ahead of them finally became clear, revealing a massive karst cave. In this karst cave, there was also an irregularly shaped pool. One end was connected to the cave wall, and at the bottom of this pool, there was a green lotus that had just poked out of the water's surface. Enter the pool on your own. You all have 3 days, and after 3 days, I will inform you to leave. Zhu Qi, the chief eunuch, said, "Do not harm that azure lotus or else you will have to bear the consequences." After saying this, Zhu Qi turned around and left. Ling Han and the others didn't stand on ceremony and didn't greet each other either. They all walked into the pool. Time was limited, so they definitely couldn't waste it. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position. The warm waters of the pool enveloped him, and he immediately discovered that the life force in his body was surging, as if he was about to immediately break through. A shackle was instantly removed. There were only 77 left. As expected of the cleansing pool, its effects were immediately apparent. Ling Han continued to absorb the energy in the pool waters. His life force surged, and in a short while his life force evolved again. Pa. The shackles shattered one after another. 70, 60, 50. There were fewer and fewer remaining shackles. Merely a day later, there were only 3 shackles left in Ling Han's body. However, at this time, even with the help of the cleansing pool, Ling Han's level of being evolution had also entered a complete stagnation. There were only 3 shackles left. For anyone, this was already perfect enough, but for Ling Han, 3 shackles was the same as 1 shackle or 100 shackles. It was still flawed. They definitely had to be broken. Open. Ling Han roared internally, pushing the energy in his body with all his might. He also used the power of dimensions, which was extremely important on his path of cultivation. He had broken through all pinnacle levels with its aid. The first shackle was blasted open. Ling Han was neither happy nor sad. He mustered up the remaining power to launch another attack. The second shackle was shattered. However, by this time, the power of dimension in his body had already begun to decline. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. The cleansing pool was already ineffective on him. Now that he had used up the power of dimension, how was he supposed to break through the final barrier? No, with the help of the cleansing pool, he was already powerless, so what other chances would he have in the future? Perhaps there was, but he needed to accumulate power for 10 years, 50 years, or even longer before he could break through the final barrier in one go. He couldn't wait that long. He had to take advantage of this opportunity to succeed in a single stroke. Ling Han's blood boiled, pushing his condition to its strongest state. The other 9 opened their eyes and looked towards him. What's going on? Why is your blood boiling when you're cultivating? Are you trying to get into a fight? Boom! It was as if a tsunami had risen up in Ling Han's body, the power of life surging. The last shackle was also blasted open. He was flawless. Ling Han broke into a smile. Now, if he accumulated some more mystical power, he would be able to break through to celestial path. He was astounded, because the energy from the cleansing pool was still surging into his body. There was no way to stimulate the evolution of his level of being, yet it had turned into mystical power, endlessly surging into his body. His meridians were incredibly wide, automatically guiding a large amount of energy into the dimensions inside his body. If it was any other mystery realm tier, after absorbing it for an hour or so, they would definitely have reached satiation from a state of exhaustion of all mystical power. However, what was Ling Han's appetite? There were countless dimensions in his body, and the space to store mystical power could be said to be close to unlimited, so how could it be filled to the brim? It didn't matter if he couldn't fill it up, but the hunger that had been entangling him all this while was beginning to weaken. Leaping over the celestial gate, this kind of hunger was not fatal, but it would not go away, and he would always feel uncomfortable. Now, a large amount of mystical power was endlessly filling into the dimensions inside his body, naturally making Ling Han feel like he was finally going to eat something. The cleansing pool had only opened after waiting for more than 2,000 years. Just how powerful was its accumulation? Ling Han remained calm and collected, silently making a fortune. A day passed, and 7 of Ling Han's dimensions had been filled up. During this period of time, he had also used the power of the cleansing pool to connect to all the dimensions in his body. This was a small matter. He only needed to pull the strings, and there was no need to open up a space. However, Ling Han was also unable to absorb the slightest bit of energy. It was very simple. The energy in the cleansing pool had already been exhausted. This was too terrifying. It had only been a little over a day, and the cleansing pool had already dried up. The other 9 stood up in confusion. What was going on here? Wasn't it agreed that they could cultivate here for 3 days? It hadn't even been a day and a half yet. What's going on? Why can't I absorb any energy? Me too. The same. The 9 of them all wore blank expressions. Ling Han also stood up, joining the ranks of, I'm also very confused. None of them were willing to give up, and continued to sit in the pool waters, waiting for the cleansing pool to glow with a second spring. But no matter how much they waited, the pool waters were the same. There was no more energy supply. 3 days had passed, and the chief eunuch, Zhu Qi, appeared, leading everyone out. Everyone hurriedly asked about the situation, but Zhu Qi had never entered the cleansing pool before, so he naturally couldn't answer. He only said that he would report this to His Majesty. After returning to the Foreign Affairs Department, Ling Han began his final preparations. He was going to leap over the celestial gate and step onto the celestial path. Ling Han gave himself 3 days to examine himself again. After taking this step, he would have left the mortal level and in the future, and it would be impossible for him to make up for the shortcomings of the mortal level. Of course, if he could obtain the saintly medicine, he would be able to compensate a little, but saintly medicine. 3 days passed, and Ling Han no longer hesitated. He began to break through to celestial path. In the current world, without the power of celestial path, it was difficult to travel anywhere. The first step of celestial path, foundation building tier. However, the reason why the celestial path was so difficult to advance into was because this first step actually contained 2 steps. The first was to leap over the celestial gate, and the second was to build the celestial foundation. Ling Han didn't know how long his breakthrough would take, nor did he know if anyone would cause trouble for him during this process. Moreover, he didn't know if he would cause any great commotion, so he didn't break through in the Foreign Affairs Department. Instead, he arrived in a forest. This was still within the boundaries of the imperial capital, so there was no need to worry that outsider cultivators would behave atrociously here, and Ling Han also chose a very hidden place. He released his spirit, and he was only left with blankness. Then, he began to stimulate the great improvement of his level of being. From mortal to celestial, this was a qualitative change, and the gap was boundless. Thus, Ling Han didn't feel the bottleneck in his cultivation level loosen for a long time. He was not in a rush. This was very normal. It would not be strange for an ordinary person to be stuck for 8 to 10 years, or even hundreds of years. Although he hadn't been a mystery realm tier for a long time, this cultivation level was very special in the first place. There were 2 main points, and that was to shatter as many shackles as possible and accumulate enough mystical power. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be enough to leap over the celestial gate. For Ling Han, the shackles in his body had been fully unlocked, and the level of being in his body had already reached the pinnacle of the mortal level. As for the reserves of mystical power in his body, it had indeed been a weakness in the past, but after entering into the cleansing pool, he had already completed this portion. Thus, he was already fully qualified to attempt breaking through to the foundation building tier. Ling Han accumulated appreciation, preparing for the impending explosion. To his surprise, this moment had not come for a long time. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, Ling Han was already feeling hungry. This time, it wasn't that his mystical power hadn't been filled, but that he was truly hungry. He endured it, and did not destroy the mental state that he had painstakingly formed. Once it was destroyed, all his previous efforts would be wasted. With his current cultivation level, not drinking water for 10 days, and not eating for 20 days would not be a problem. 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, Hong. A drastic change suddenly took place in Ling Han's body. The power of life exploded, and every cell was trembling, as if they were about to explode. It's here, it's here, it's here. Ling Han only felt his body tremble. It was as if his soul had exited his body and flown into the galaxy, instantly traversing an endless distance. Where was this? He finally stopped, and saw that his surroundings were pitch black, and ahead of him was a massive bronze door. The bronze door was 300 meters tall and modeled all over, covered with veined patterns, as if it had experienced too many years. This was the Celestial Gate. Ling Han was astonished. Right now, he was definitely in a soul state. However, was there truly such a place in the galaxy? Did a Celestial Gate exist? He was not in a rush to leap. Instead, he walked closer, wanting to take a good look at this bronze door. However, a force instantly repelled him. It was too powerful and was not something that Ling Han could contend against at all, so he could not approach. Ling Han focused his gaze, wanting to see clearly. However, no matter how hard he tried, he was still unable to see the veined patterns on the door. It was as if there was an invisible power blurring his vision. He tried to activate his eye technique, but he was only a spirit form now, so how could he possibly use it? He watched for a very long time, and only then did he reluctantly give up. Forget it, he had best just directly leap over the Celestial Gate. If this was known to others, they would definitely find it inconceivable. Why are you so curious? Don't you think that you should be doing proper business? Ling Han leaped with all his might. In his spiritual soul state, he was very special, and was far taller than usual. Thus, the Celestial Gate that was 300 meters tall was easily leaped over by him. Then I am now a celestial and can build a celestial foundation? He had not even finished this thought, when Ling Han felt that power come again, dragging him as he continued to soar through the dark galaxy. After who knew how long, he appeared in a new place. It was still dark all around them, but another door had appeared ahead of them. After circling around for half a day, he had returned to the original spot. No, the door ahead of him was not only 1,500 meters tall, it was also white and silver in color. First it was bronze, then it was silver. Could it be that there was a gold door after this? Ling Han recalled what Princess Bixiao had said. She had crossed 2 celestial gates, but at the time she had not explained in detail. If he had known earlier, he should have investigated in more detail. Who cares? He would just continue to leap. Ling Han still wanted to carefully observe the silver door first, but there was also a force stopping him from doing so. Sigh. Ling Han leaped over, easily crossing over this silver celestial gate. However, his soul had not returned, when his soul was once again grabbed by a powerful force and roamed through the galaxy. When he stopped, a celestial gate appeared in front of him. Ling Han only gave an "oh" and wasn't so surprised. Could it be that the higher one's talent, the more celestial gates one could cross, and then the stronger one's abilities would be? However, Ling Han decided to try to get closer first. After discovering that he couldn't, he would leap over. In any case, this wouldn't take much time. The golden celestial gate was unfathomably tall, but Ling Han still barely managed to leap over with a leap. It should be about time, right? It should be time for his soul to return, right? However, he did not. Breaking through, Ling Han didn't know that every time he leaped over a celestial gate, heaven and earth would exert a power on him, causing his soul to become much stronger. Leaping 3 times over a celestial gate, and his spiritual power had become at least 100 times stronger. The leaves of the trees in the entire forest fluttered. Sha, sha, sha. The leaves collided, creating a strange sound. Meanwhile, Ling Han was completely confused. His soul was once again dragged up. Soaring through the boundless galaxy, he couldn't help but curse. First, it was a bronze celestial gate, then a silver celestial gate, and then it was a golden celestial gate. Next, would there be a purple celestial gate, crimson celestial gate, green celestial gate? Just as his thoughts were running wild, his soul had already stopped. There was indeed another celestial gate ahead of him, but it was not tall or majestic at all. Instead, it was an incomplete door. That was a stone door, and the upper half had already been corroded and weathered. Could not be more than 6 meters tall, and looked like a damaged wall that was standing there. Ling Han thought that this was a stone door because that was his first impression, but the upper half was already gone. Why were the first 3 celestial gates completely unscathed, while this one was damaged? After the golden celestial gate, shouldn't it be a celestial gate of divine metal, or a celestial gate of origin gold? A stone door. Ling Han was filled with curiosity. He walked over and initially thought that he would immediately be expelled, but when he got close enough, he still did not feel any power pushing him over. Since there was no obstruction, Ling Han naturally placed his hand on the stone door. Instantly, a primitive aura flooded over, letting him know that this stone door should be incredibly ancient. Perhaps it was as ancient as this galaxy, or perhaps it had already existed before this galaxy had been created. However, why was it damaged? Being the 4th celestial gate, shouldn't it be immortal and indestructible? LMG Han rubbed it for a while, but there were no veined patterns on the stone door. It was only ancient and aged, and nothing could be seen. Forget it, he had best just directly leap over the celestial gate. Ling Han leaped lightly over the stone door. There was no difficulty or pressure at all. However, there was also no change. There was no power to pull him away, nor was he sent back. He was just standing here awkwardly like this. Fuck, what was this? LMG Han frowned. This wasn't right. Moreover, the 4th celestial gate was too easy to leap over, wasn't it? Previously, when he had leaped over the golden celestial gate, though he had also leaped over it, he had only barely managed to leap over it even if he had used all his power. This stone door had already been destroyed, so its true height shouldn't be just a few meters. Thus, his leap didn't count, but it had nothing to do with him. It was your business to destroy it, so why should I bear this responsibility? LMG Han grumbled in his mind. However, there was nowhere he could vent his grievances at this moment, so he could only come up with another plan. He strode forwards. After taking a few steps, he walked towards the stone door, wanting to push it open and pass through. This was an unconscious action, but when he pushed open the stone door, a force stopped him. He felt that the stone door was incredibly heavy, and he had only pushed it open a little. LMG Han, on the other hand, smiled. There was a chance. He pushed with all his might, inch by inch, but before he had even reached half a foot, the power increased greatly. Pong, it forced his hands back, and the stone door closed tightly again. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Ling Han came to his senses, and once again began to push open the doors. It was still the same. After pushing Ling Han away for less than half a foot, that power suddenly soared, wanting to push Ling Han back. LMG Han channeled his full power and forcefully withstood the attack. However, this power was also endless and did not dissipate. Instead, it was resisting him and was slowly increasing. It still wanted to push him back. Half an inch, Ling Han slowly retreated. He couldn't help but frown. His spiritual power was only this powerful, so there was no way he could unleash it again. It would be great if he could use mystical power. Hold on, why couldn't he? Could it be that it was because he was a soul? Let's give it a try. Ling Han made a comeback, and with a loud roar, channeled power madly. Boom! A miraculous scene appeared. He exploded with even stronger power. Mystical power could be used. He aggressively advanced, breaking through half a foot of distance. But the more he pushed open the door, the stronger the force of the counter-rebuke would be, and very soon he was pushed back. Since that was the case, Ling Han used the demonic monkey fists, channeled destructive energy, and stacked 100 overlapping layers of power to form frequency attack. After advancing into Mystery Realm tier, Ling Han's mastery of the demonic monkey fists had naturally improved further. Boom! The stone door suddenly opened. Ling Han smiled and strode through. However, he immediately discovered that though the stone door had opened, there seemed to be an invisible barrier blocking him. It was not as sturdy as the stone door, but was incredibly elastic. Furthermore, it was pressing down on him from all directions, and he was still unable to pass through. Boom! However, though the power of his punch was domineering, his head, torso, and legs were all bearing the force, causing him to be extremely unbalanced in the force of the blow. He stumbled and landed solidly on the ground. Even though he was a soul, he still felt pain. The repulsive force assaulted him from all directions. How could he block it? No, that's not right. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He was a soul now, and since he was a soul, why was he stuck in human form? Ling Han laughed loudly, and his body suddenly changed shape, leaving behind only his head. Then, 2 arms grew out of his head, waving his fists as he charged towards the stone door. Open! Pung, pung, pung! Ling Han swung his fists rapidly. With destructive energy and demonic monkey fists, he was extremely domineering, forcefully opening up a path. He charged into the stone door for about 5 meters, but there was still a force stopping him. Now, he could clearly see that there was a layer of light on the stone door, which had a strong flexibility and elasticity. Now, he had pushed it back 5 meters, and the compressive power had also reached the peak, wanting to bounce him back by force. If he wanted to pass through the stone door, he would have to break through this light screen. Break! 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 Ling Han roared in his mind as he swung his fists even more rapidly. Destructive energy smashed into the barrier of light. This light screen was a little terrifying. Just how powerful was destructive energy? Yet, it was actually unable to succeed time and time again. LMG Han was completely unconcerned. There was only one thought left in his mind, and that was to deliver a punch. If 1 punch couldn't deal with it, then 2 punches. If 2 punches couldn't deal with it, then 10 punches, 100 punches, 1,000 punches. Ka, ka, ka. Multiple white lines appeared on the screen of light, as dense as a spider's web. He was about to break through. However, the more this was the case, the greater the resistance created by the light screen was. In fact, it even looked like it was about to push Ling Han back. Though it was only a sliver, a few white lines immediately disappeared. Clearly, the light screen had been repaired. Ling Han roared in fury, his fists raining down like rain. The speed far exceeded his limits. He was a soul and would not be restricted by the body. Ka, ka, ka. More and more white lines appeared, and finally, with a bang, the light screen shattered. Ling Han stumbled through the stone door. Success! Ling Han hadn't come back to his senses yet, when a massive power began to drag him downwards rapidly. Right at this moment, he suddenly saw a figure appearing where he had previously been. The other party had also discovered Ling Han's presence, and looked towards him. However, the dragging force was too strong, and Ling Han's speed was too fast. Neither of them seemed to have seen how the other looked like. Ling Han's heart clenched. Aside from him, there was actually another person that could come to the fourth celestial gate. He had not even finished the thought, when it was as if his soul had become weightless and rapidly fell. Then, in the forest, Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. Ling Han opened his eyes, and two pillars of light instantly shot out from his eyes. Pa pa pa! The surrounding trees immediately crumbled. This was not because he had cultivated some mystical power, but rather because after he had leaped over the celestial gate, his spiritual power and mystical power had both improved astonishingly, and he was still unable to adapt to his present power. With a sweep of his gaze, he had broken down the trees. He had leaped over the celestial gate, yet had yet to reach the foundation building tier. Right now, he could be considered a pseudo-celestial path elite. However, at this moment, Ling Han naturally wouldn't give up halfway. He continued to build his celestial foundation. Doubt flashed through his mind. Why was there a damaged celestial gate? He had never heard of this before. Could it be that it had appeared because he had cultivated the mortal level to perfection? However, he also saw another person appear in front of the stone door. Could it be that someone had also cultivated the mortal level to perfection? Was this possible? He could cultivate a flawless body because countless dimensions had nurtured in his body. How could it be that this kind of good fortune would happen to a second person? Let's not think about this first. If he had the chance to encounter that person in the future, he would get to know him better. However, there was a sea of people, so where was he supposed to find him? And that must be a supreme prodigy, so he will just have to search in this direction. Ling Han began to build his celestial foundation. He didn't use the foundation building divine stone, since he already knew that it was formed from the blood of a great emperor. If he wanted to walk out his own path to become an emperor, he couldn't walk the same path as the other. Moreover, he had previously been immersed in the sea of true blood, so the benefits he had received were far superior to any foundation-building divine stone. What foundation should I build? Ling Han buried a belief in invincibility, a fighting spirit that would never be defeated, and used it as the foundation of the celestial path. Then he wrapped it with his spiritual power and nourished it with his mystical power, continuously strengthening it. He thought of the stone celestial gate and couldn't help but have a thought. He intentionally shaped it into that shape. Even the material was the same, possessing the rough, veined patterns of stone. That's right, there was also the primitive aura. Quang. Right at this moment, a sudden clap of thunder suddenly sounded in the heaven and earth. Dark clouds rolled out, densely gathered above the mountains and forests. Flashes of light intertwined, as if they could strike down at any moment. Ling Han couldn't help but feel shocked. He imitated the stone celestial gate to construct the foundation stone of the celestial path, and it actually made heaven and earth furious? Fuck, where had this stone celestial gate come from? The heaven and earth actually considered it a taboo? But the more this was the case, the more determined Ling Han was to do it. If he were to build a celestial foundation like this, he would definitely be incredibly powerful. Come, so what if the heavens are furious? If you have the ability, strike down the lightning. Quang, the lightning really struck down. Just a few meters away from Ling Han, a large tree was instantly severed and crashed towards him. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and this broken tree was sent flying. Are you trying to scare me? He continued to construct his celestial foundation. Quang, quang, quang. The thunder became even louder, and more lightning struck down, but not a single bolt struck him. The heavens' calamity descended from the skies, only striking great evils. Ling Han had nothing to do with that. Heavenly Tao was merciless, letting all things perish or emerge of themselves, so how could it now treat him with prejudice? However, right at this moment, a bolt of purple lightning suddenly struck down, directly sinking into Ling Han's mind. The purple lightning took the form of a human figure that was filled with dignity. He shouted loudly, "How dare you? You actually dare to oppose the heaven and earth, without any respect or fear. This god will come and kill you." Shua, the purple figure, charged over at an incredibly fast speed. It was an internal demon. Ling Han immediately thought. It was not that this world did not have heaven's calamity, but it did not mean destroying a person physically, but rather destroying a person's soul. The internal demons would cause chaos, and cause one to become a demon. Thus, the heavenly Tao would have a reason to send down a heaven's calamity to eliminate them. And Ling Han's internal demon was even more direct. It was not going to disturb him, but rather directly destroy his spirit. Without his divine sense, his physical body would be an empty shell. No matter how awesome his celestial foundation was, what was the use? The internal demon attacked, wanting to penetrate Ling Han's mind and strike his spirit. And Ling Han suddenly spoke up. Wang, the sound of Buddha boomed out. Crack. Cracks instantly appeared on the purple figure's body, but there was only one crack. And Ling Han roared again. His voice was like a deep and thought-provoking bell. Ka. Another crack appeared on the purple figure. Ling Han charged over, unleashing an intense battle. Pong, pong, pong. He naturally had to rely on his spiritual power to sever his internal demons. This mystical power wouldn't be of much use. The internal demon was extremely powerful. This was not the internal demon tribulation that Ling Han had formed after cultivating the celestial foundation. Instead, it was because the celestial foundation that he wanted to build was too extraordinary. The heaven and earth had descended the internal demon tribulation ahead of time to prevent him from being so treasonous. However, Ling Han had mastered the 6 characters Bright King Curse, which was specifically used to kill evil and subdue internal demons. Even if there was only one word, it was still very effective. 2 more cracks appeared on the internal demon's body, and its battle prowess naturally fell drastically. It was completely suppressed by Ling Han. N. Ling Han shouted repeatedly, and more cracks appeared on the internal demon. Finally, it shattered with a bang. As expected, the Buddhist race specialized in subduing internal demons. Just the in-character alone was already so awesome, so if it was complete with all 6 characters, just how powerful would it be? Ling Han was completely unconcerned and continued to construct the celestial foundation. Quang. Another bolt of purple lightning struck down, manifesting in Ling Han's mind and launching an attack. Ling Han shook his head. The 6 characters Bright King Curse continued to be shouted out, and the internal demonic entity couldn't threaten him at all. He was multitasking. This time, he was only suppressing the internal demon in his heart but not disintegrating it. On the other side, he was speeding up the process of building the celestial foundation. Obviously, if he did not interrupt or complete it, this internal demon from this heaven's calamity would have no end. Fight! 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 Ling Han remained calm and confident. A day later, the celestial foundation was completed. The foundation of human Tao was only the size of a fist, yet it exuded a grand and majestic aura. There was also a sense of a primitive aura, as if this was the cornerstone of heaven and earth when it was first created, and could support heaven and earth. In the skies, the dark clouds dispersed. The heaven and earth could no longer stop him, so the tribulation clouds naturally could only disperse. However, the dark clouds had not dispersed completely, but in the next instant, the dark clouds gathered again. Heaven's calamity again? This naturally was not to stop Ling Han from building his celestial foundation, but rather because he had successfully built his foundation, and the heaven and earth would send down a punishment of tribulation. This was a routine matter. However, in comparison, this internal demon was too weak. Ling Han only shouted 10 consecutive times of the in-character, and the internal demon was completely resolved. Ling Han was just about to stand up, when he suddenly realized that all the apertures in his body had been opened. The power of heaven and earth surged towards him, greatly boosting his mystical power. It was the same even for spiritual power. Only after taking this step would he truly step out of the mortal level. Ling Han hurriedly sat down and channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique, absorbing the benefits with all his might. The mystery realms created by other foundation building tiers wouldn't be very big. Perhaps they would be filled up in a short while, but Ling Han's mystery realms were like bottomless pits. No matter how the power of heaven and earth was stuffed into his hands, he would take them all. Unfortunately, only half a day had passed, and peace returned to heaven and earth. What level has my strength reached now? Ling Han stroked his chin in anticipation. However, the most important thing now was not to be curious about his own strength, but to release the Empress and the others. Heavenly Venerable Tier Elites appear. Ling Han was filled with anticipation. He would be able to release those heavenly venerates in his body once he had stepped onto the celestial path. This was something that he had always guessed. Now that he had finally become a foundation-building cultivator, he was also nervous about whether he could succeed or not. For this day, he had long since prepared himself. A long time ago, he had already set his eyes on a heavenly venerable tier elite. He was an extremely evil person, and should have died long ago. However, Ling Han had imprisoned him and not killed him, all this while just for the sake of performing an experiment now. This was a first-tier heavenly venerate. With a thought, he forcibly extracted the other from his body. This heavenly venerable tier elite screamed in agony. Passing through the inner world was no joke. There was an incredibly strong resistance, and even with his physique, he could not bear it. However, how could Ling Han care? He forcefully pushed him out. That heavenly venerable tier elite fell onto the ground, all his clothes completely damaged. He had withstood the massive pressure to pass through the passageway of the two realms, but his clothes could not. Furthermore, the suppression of this heaven and earth on him was too great. At present, he was like an infant born prematurely, incredibly weak. He was indeed weak, but in the end he had come out safely. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. He had succeeded. "Where is this?" the heavenly venerable tier elite asked in a stuttering voice. He couldn't open his eyes, and he only knew that he had lost all of his divine power. He was as fragile as an infant. In truth, he was like an infant born prematurely at that. "And who are you?" the heavenly venerable tier elite continued to ask. Ling Han's strength terrified him. He was a heavenly venerable tier elite, yet he had actually been captured here for no reason. "You don't need to know. Just die." Ling Han shot out a punch and the destructive energy swept past. That heavenly venerable tier elite was immediately annihilated. The reason why he hadn't killed him, but rather directly erased him, was because Ling Han still wanted to release the Empress and the others later. They had reunited after such a long time, yet there was a corpse that was an eyesore. How troublesome would that be? Ling Han communicated with the Empress and the others, telling them to make preparations. "Husband, we are already prepared." "Ling Han, Nyo really wants to see you." The women were all eager to give it a try. Ling Han nodded. He first fetched the Empress, who was the strongest among the women. Even if he was in charge of his world, Ling Han had no way to directly elevate others to heavenly venerable tier level. He could only try his best to make things as convenient as possible, and it was the same for those who had advanced into heavenly venerable tier level. They would have to comprehend appreciation on their own. Ling Han could only rapidly make them celestial kings. With a single thought, he could make a mortal become a ninth heaven celestial king. Furthermore, there were no after effects, and the price was that he would have to expend a portion of his power. After all, only 2 years had passed, and now, with the passing of time, even if the Empress received special treatment from Ling Han, she had only reached 6th tier. 6th tier heavenly venerates were already very strong, and even 1st tier heavenly venerates could safely come out, so what more a 6th tier heavenly venerate? However, Ling Han was still a little nervous at this moment, and he carefully escorted the Empress out. In just a short while, the Empress appeared. Ling Han hurriedly drew out a blanket that he had long since prepared, and draped it over the Empress. Though there were no outsiders here, the Empress's body was extraordinarily weak compared to this heaven and earth. It was very easy for her to catch a cold. Ling Han," the Empress stammered. She tried her best to open her eyes, and only after glancing at Ling Han did she finally close them and rest in peace. With Ling Han by her side, even if she came to this new world, she would be extremely at ease. Ling Han also breathed a sigh of relief and began to guide Hunyo out. Nyo is here. Pa Hunyo was Hunyo. Even if she was as weak as a newborn, she still called out happily. Ling Han was rendered speechless. Then, among his beautiful wives, there was actually no third wife that had reached the heavenly venerable tier. Could not be helped. Aside from the Empress and Hunyo, the other women's natural talent was not all that impressive. Though he had opened the back door for them, how could 2 years' time be enough? Thankfully, as long as they were inside Ling Han's body, that was another world. There was another set of regulations, and as long as they had become celestial kings, everyone would not have to worry about their lifespans and Immortal's calamity. Thus, as long as Ling Han didn't die, the people in his body wouldn't have to worry about their lifespans. Ling Han continued to let them go. Lin Luo, Zhou, the karmic life heavenly venerable, the large black dog, and so on all came out of his body as long as they had reached heavenly venerable tier. Actually, this was a weakening effect on him. After all, every person that came out of the entity would mean one less supply of spiritual power, but Ling Han naturally wouldn't care. All of a sudden, several hundred people had appeared in the forest. Thankfully, Ling Han had prepared enough clothes. Otherwise, it would have been so much fun. Ling Han wrapped them up with the essence nurturing gourd, but the internal space was limited, and one time wasn't enough, so he could only come back and pack them up a few more times. He bought a large courtyard and placed everyone inside. 4 days later, Lin Luo and the other former 7th tier heavenly venerates were the first to be able to get out of bed. They had also obtained the cultivation techniques that Ling Han had prepared for them, alchemical pills and support formations. They had already begun to cultivate. With their talent, it wouldn't be long before they could step into the blood transformation tier. The help that Ling Han could provide them now was really too great. A 7th tier heavenly venerate needed only 4 days to recover. A 6th tier needed 6 days. A 5th tier needed 8 days. And a 4th tier needed 11 days. In short, the weaker they were, the later they would be able to get out of bed. After more than 20 days, everyone finally recovered. After so many days, Ling Han was naturally familiar with his current cultivation level. His strength had undergone an earth-shaking change. Firstly, it was spiritual power. Though being able to release everyone out of the inner world was already the most direct reflection, if used in battle, he could already instantly compress the heavenly pattern jade into a few grams. There was completely no need to instill mystical power into it. The moment spiritual power moved, it could be shot out at 30 times the speed of sound. Probably, killing a heavenly Tao Foundation cultivator would only need a single strike, and it was not impossible for a heavenly Tao Foundation cultivator to be killed instantly either. As for the details, it would still have to depend on actual battle. On the other hand, his spiritual power was finally strong enough to form a connection with the heavenly pattern jade. In other words, unless he was much stronger than his spiritual power, no one else would be able to use the heavenly pattern jade even if he obtained it. Secondly, his mystical power was strong enough, and his level of being also had a qualitative change. It could already withstand the burden of channeling a celestial technique. At present, he could channel the imminent skyline for a long time, about an hour or so. Only then would his body become so hot that it was about to burn, and he would not be able to continue. However, he could only channel the 3 styles of the god of war once. Of course, the might of these 3 styles was also terrifyingly powerful. The power of the demonic monkey fists had also reached 108 layers. This was the limit, and there was no way to increase it further. The eye technique could also be maintained for a long time, and only after continuously activating for half a day would his eyes feel dry. In short, his improvement was much, much too great. "I really want to fight with Hong Tianbu," Ling Han murmured. However, he still needed to take care of the others, so he didn't have the energy to play around for the time being. He had already made up his mind. When they could stand on their own 2 feet, he would seek out the second prince and the others, and give them a good beating. However, after advancing into celestial path, that supplementary cultivation technique of his became useless. It was also the same for the brother monkey cultivation technique. It seemed they were not suitable for celestial path. There were pros and cons. However, in comparison, these cons could be ignored. A perfect match. Ling Han, play with Nyo. Hunyo jumped over, a youthful smile on her face. Ling Han laughed loudly. and pulled this beautiful wife that had not grown up into his arms. Wait a few more days, and I will give you a few children to play with. Sure, sure. Hunyo giggled. Others were seizing the time to understand this world, but she did not feel the slightest bit of nervousness. It was as if as long as Ling Han was here, everything was enough. She had no ambitions, and would act as she pleased, taking things as they came. Another few days later, everyone was equipped with the ability to walk freely, and Lin Luo and the others, who had started cultivating the earliest, had already reached the peak stage of meridian opening tier. They only had to open all their meridians, and they would be able to step into blood transformation tier in a perfect state. Ling Han believed that these people were all prodigies. After all, they had been accumulated by Genesis World for who knew how many years. Although they didn't have an inner world inside them, so they couldn't step onto the 7th change, 7th extreme, and so on, it wasn't difficult for them to become 3-star geniuses. Everyone discussed for a while. Lin Luo and the others all expressed that they would stay temporarily in the imperial capital. This planet had just awakened, and for beginners like them, it was a paradise. After they set foot on celestial path, it would not be too late for them to go to the other great planets. Ling Shi, Ling Jianxue, and the other children also expressed their desire to train on the celestial sea planet first, so they would not accompany Ling Han to the holy land of metal element. What were they going to do? Just stand by and watch? Ling Han had already prepared enough alchemical pills for everyone, and added with the accumulation from selling alchemical pills previously, his wealth was extraordinarily abundant. It was completely no problem for him to supply these people. Moreover, with the awakening of heaven and earth, treasured fruits of life also appeared one after another. At least, for those below the celestial path, they weren't all that valuable. They could be bought as long as one could pay. After resolving this most important matter, Ling Han decided to set out for the holy land of metal element. This time he planned to bring the Empress, Hunyo, the large black dog, and Wally. After all, he was only going for the metal element fruit gathering. He wouldn't be staying there for too long. It was the large black dog's own choice, while Wally's calculation ability was highly valued by Ling Han. He accompanied the two women, and brought the large black dog and Wally to the Foreign Affairs Department. The large black dog's mouth was wide open. He wanted to say something, but all he could say was, "Woof, woof, woof." In this world, it was just an ordinary dog, so how could it possibly open its mouth to speak? At the very least, it had to reach the blood transformation tier and consume the transformation fruit to be able to speak human language, and even transform into human form. Though so many days had passed, the large black dog was still not used to it. It barked endlessly, yet could not say anything, which made it feel extremely uncomfortable. Ling Han was naturally very familiar with it, and said with a smile, "Are you trying to say that I'm doing quite well now?" The large black dog hurriedly nodded. There was no need for its intelligence to awaken again. However, it was still too weak now, so it couldn't even speak. However, it couldn't be stopped even if it couldn't speak. The large black dog still raised a paw, as if he was giving Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han wore a strange expression, and said, "Say, when you came out of the inner world, didn't your iron underwear shatter? What's up with this one now?" The large black dog was currently wearing a pair of purple underpants, and as he walked, he would twist his behind. This was truly an eyesore. Woof, 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 woof. The large black dog barked repeatedly, as if he was complaining. Ling Han could just barely understand. It should be because its present physique was still unable to wear iron underwear, so it could only wear cloth. It was a dog that knew shame. As for where this pair of underpants had come from, Ling Han didn't want to know. He kept feeling that this inside story was too dirty. Ling Han, you're finally back." Shen Yuan Dingguo walked out. He swept an eye over the Empress and Hunyo, and a stunned expression appeared on his face. Thankfully, the two women had covered their faces, and he could only see their figures. Otherwise, he would not be stunned, but rather dumbfounded. Then, when he saw the large black dog, he couldn't help but drool. "Where did you get this mutt from? It's so fat. Are you eating dog meat tonight?" The large black dog was enraged. He actually dared to say that he wanted to eat dog meat in front of Grandpa Dog? And eat Grandpa Dog? It scuttled out and opened its mouth to bite. See if I won't bite you to death, bastard. Let go. Let go. Xianxia Dingwa shouted loudly. With his strength, he naturally couldn't be bitten by the large black dog. However, being dragged around by a dog was humiliating enough. Ling Han laughed loudly. Has anything happened these few days? No, there are just some rumors saying that you're not qualified to participate in the metal element fruit gathering. You don't live up to your name, and you're not worthy of being called a prodigy of the imperial capital, Xianxia Dingwa said. Ling Han smiled faintly. He did not take this kind of empty reputation to heart. Moreover, he was not the prodigy of the imperial capital, but rather the greatest prodigy of the universe, all right? And these two are? Xianxia Dingwa approached and asked softly. His eyes drifted to the Empress and Hunyo. Your elder sisters-in-law, Ling Han replied. Pei, its younger sisters-in-law, Xianxia Dingwa immediately said. He then shamelessly greeted the two women, saying, That brat Ling Han is truly good at hiding. He only allowed me to see two sisters-in-law at this moment. He's treating me like an outsider. Its elder sisters-in-law, the Empress said proudly. In her heart, she was the most important person in this world. Not counting Ling Han as that was her husband. Xianxia Dingwa couldn't help but be startled. Why was this girl so proud? However, though the Empress's appearance was hidden, her aura was astonishing, forcefully suppressing him. Father! At this time, the 7 babies also ran over. The little lowly followed behind, looking very laid back, while the fat pig was held in her arms. Handsome brother, where did you get 2 great beauties from? Tang Yuner was slightly surprised as she looked at the Empress and Hunyo. Though the appearances of the 2 women were not apparent, their figures were too perfect. Furthermore, they were enchantingly voluptuous. She was sure that they were definitely great beauties, almost catching up to her. The little lowly had never known modesty about her own looks. Pa! She threw the fat pig onto the ground and pounced towards the Empress. She was too beautiful, and she really wanted to hug her. The fat pig fell to the ground and instantly screamed in pain. Though it could not be wounded, it was still very painful, bastard. However, Tang Yuner also missed her target. Ling Han managed to pick up the Empress in time, preventing the little lowly from succeeding. The large black dog immediately darted out and pressed a paw on the fat pig, barking at Ling Han. The meaning was too simple. Let's eat roasted suckling pig tonight and have a snack. On the other side, Hunyo was also drooling. Roasted suckling pig. Roasted suckling pig. Roasted suckling pig. When the 7 babies heard this, they instantly felt an amiable feeling towards Hunyo. This was one with similar tastes. Roasted suckling pig. Roasted suckling pig. They too called out, their small eyes bright. The fat pig bore a deep hatred. Do you all have some kind of enmity with pigs? Why do you all want to eat roasted suckling pig when you see me? Did a pig offend you guys? Goo! It barked at the large black dog. It was all this despicable dog's fault for starting it. Woof, 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 woof. The large black dog naturally wasn't willing to be outdone. He had never been one to suffer losses. One look, and he could tell that this perverted pig was definitely scolding him. Goo, goo, goo. Woof, woof, woof. All right, now that the pig and dog had clashed, they were both shouting at each other. Though they could not understand each other's words, they definitely could not allow any weakness to show. Bastard. Everyone found this interesting. Whether it was the fat pig or the large black dog, they had clearly developed intelligence, but for various reasons they could not speak. The pig could only bark at the dog, and the dog would bark at the pig. All right, no roasted suckling pig, no dog meat. Let's just get something to eat, Ling Han said with a smile. They sat down first, and then Ling Han made arrangements. He was going to leave Celestial Sea Planet. This trip would take at least more than half a year, so he definitely had to make proper arrangements, unlike before when he had Princess Bixiao to act in his place. Thinking of this, Ling Han felt that this princess of the demon race was still quite useful. You're leaving again? Xianxia Dingwa asked in astonishment. This chief of the Foreign Affairs Department was far too incompetent. The Foreign Affairs Department had only been established for a short while, yet he had already been absent for 90% of the time. Ling Han nodded and said, "In the future, I'll leave the Foreign Affairs Department to you." "Me? Can I protect the department?" Shenyuan Dingwa appeared extremely unconfident. "It's fine. Now that the ownership of the various great forces has been decided, the Foreign Affairs Department actually doesn't have much else to do. Furthermore, before I leave, I will do one more thing. I guarantee that no one would dare to trifle with the Foreign Affairs Department in future," Ling Han said with a smile. "What do you want to do?" Shenyuan Dingwa suddenly felt a very bad premonition. Ling Han cracked a smile. "To make an example, later, I will go and give the second prince, the third prince and the others a good beating." "Don't you mess around." Shenyuan Dingwa instantly panicked. "Are you trying to get into big trouble?" "Che, he's just the son of a spiritual transformation tier elite. So what if he is beaten up?" Tang Yuner licked the toffee with a nonchalant expression. On the sidelines, Kunyo was drooling, staring fixedly at the toffee in her hand. She didn't have the slightest bit of reservedness. Shenyuan Dingwa inhaled sharply. How was it that each of these people was fiercer than the last? If a spirit transformation true lord was nothing, then what would something be? Don't worry. It will be fine," Ling Han said. How could Shenyuan Dingwa relax? However, he couldn't persuade Ling Han at all, so he could only do nothing. Ling Han invited Yin Shoujing, Lian Shuerong and the others over for a meal. This could be considered a farewell feast. Seeing the Empress and Hunyo, even if Yin Shoujing and Lian Shuerong were proud of their exquisite beauty, they still felt ashamed of their own inferiority. And this was still because the two women were wearing veils. If they really revealed their true faces, who knew what kind of commotion it would cause? Thus, Ling Han's current strength was still very weak, so he could only tell the two women to keep a low profile. After eating, Ling Han left the Foreign Affairs Department and headed directly to the manor of the second prince. The Empress, Hunyo, the large black dog, the little Loli, and the babies all followed behind. They were all people who liked to join in on the excitement, so how could they miss this opportunity? Thus, this team was also very strange. There were beauties, little beauties, babies, a dog, and a pig. As they passed, everyone was dumbfounded. What was the prodigy of the imperial capital trying to do? In a short while, Ling Han had already arrived in front of the manor of the second prince. As a dignified imperial prince, he was naturally living in a luxurious manor. It occupied an extremely large area and was dazzling and resplendent. There were even 8 large men standing guard at the entrance, looking extremely fierce. "Hey, stop!" A large man pulled out a section of the saber at his waist and shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han snapped his fingers. "Show!" With a flick of his finger, the large man was instantly sent flying. Pong! The door was forcefully pushed open. "How dare you!" The remaining 7 men all drew their sabers and surrounded Ling Han and the others. "You actually dare to behave atrociously in the residence of the second imperial prince? Are you tired of living? Who are you? Tell me your name." The 7 of them called out one after another. Someone had sent out a signal summoning helpers. The intruder could send one person flying with a single finger. These abilities were too powerful. Even if the 7 of them joined forces, they should not be a match. "You don't even recognize me?" Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. These people were really too ignorant and ill-informed. "Woof, woof, woof, woof." The large black dog barked, holding his stomach and laughing so hard that he was lying down. What it meant was, "Little Han, aren't you boasting that you're doing very well? Just look, even the guards at the door don't know who you are, and you still have the nerve." Ling Han didn't make a move either. With a thought, it was as if those 7 large men had been grabbed by an invisible hand. They continued to wave their limbs in midair, and all of them looked terrified. Had they seen a ghost? Of course not. Ling Han's current spiritual power was who knew how many times stronger. He could easily lift a rock weighing 100 to 150,000 kilograms, what more grab 7 people. He strode into the manor, and with a wave of his spiritual power, the 7 large men were all thrown out. They had all fainted from the impact. This time he was here to beat up the second prince. As for the others, he did not take them to heart either. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Amidst a chaotic commotion, groups of soldiers appeared, surrounding Ling Han and the others. Humph! Ling Han, how dare you? You even dare to barge into my manor. Do you really think that just because my imperial father dotes on you, you can do as you please? The second imperial prince also appeared, his expression livid. He, a dignified imperial prince, actually had an enemy beating right at his doorstep. Just how humiliating was this? Ling Han smiled faintly and nodded. That's right. Not bad. The second imperial prince was instantly stunned. Had this brat gone mad? No matter how much you are doted on, you are still a subject, so how could you possibly step on top of your master? Treason! Treason! He said balefully, his killing intent on full display. Ling Han had delivered himself to his doorstep, so even if he killed him, Chen Fengyan wouldn't be able to say anything. Ling Han smiled and said, You imperial princes keep targeting me, just because you have someone backing you up. Do you think I don't have a temper? So what if you have a temper? The second imperial prince moved and charged towards Ling Han. You are a servant and we are the masters. You are only a mortal, but we are celestials. In our eyes, you are only an ant. He had already charged over in a single step and stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han's head. Pa! Ling Han made a move and delivered a slap, crisp and loud. The second imperial prince was instantly sent flying back at an even faster speed than he had come. Pong! The wall behind him couldn't block his advance at all, and a hole was instantly blasted into it. Then he continued to fly. Pong, pong, pong. He crashed through 9 walls in one go, and only then did he stop lying on the ground. The second imperial prince forcibly got back to his feet, his face filled with shock. Why you have broken through to celestial path? There was only one possibility. Otherwise, no matter how awesome a mystery realm tier was, that was still trash in front of a foundation building elite. Ling Han stood lazily, but his spiritual power took form and grabbed the second prince, tossing him in his direction. In terms of absolute power, spiritual power definitely couldn't compete with mystical power. Even if Ling Han's spiritual power was stronger than an ordinary foundation-building cultivator's, it was at most 250,000 kilograms. This was inferior to the mystical power that he had even at the Meridian opening tier. The strength of spiritual power was invisibility, and there was no speed restriction. If it was used like brute force, that would practically be a waste. However, the second imperial prince was already severely wounded at this moment, so it was impossible for him to resist. Spiritual power was more than enough to deal with him. Moreover, wasn't this showing off a lot? Beating up the imperial princes, the hundreds of soldiers all widened their eyes in shock. Their second imperial prince was picked up from the ground out of nowhere, and then tossed back towards Ling Han, as if there was an invisible giant hand controlling him. Because of their ignorance, they all knelt down, thinking that the gods had appeared. The large black dog raised his head and looked around. This was the feeling he wanted, and he was so excited that he was howling. Just as the second imperial prince was about to crash into Ling Han, his body suddenly stopped in a strange manner. He hovered in midair, his limbs drooping. He glared furiously at Ling Han. You dare to hit me, you dare to hit me! Pa! Ling Han slapped the second imperial prince again, a crisp slap landing on the second imperial prince's face. However, he hadn't used too much power this time. If he had used the same attack as before, the second prince would most likely have been killed. At that time, Chen Fengyan definitely wouldn't be able to sit still. Now, however, his uncle was teaching his grand-nephew a lesson. What could Chen Fengyan say? I'm hitting you. Are you dissatisfied? Ling Han asked with a smile. Don't be arrogant, the second imperial prince said through gritted teeth. Even if you've advanced to the celestial path, this is still the imperial capital. The power left behind by my imperial father is completely capable of suppressing you. Oh! Ling Han nodded and asked in reply, Don't you think it's strange that when I've already come to blows, but why isn't anyone stopping me? That's right. The second imperial prince was slightly dazed. Previously, when they had made a move on Ling Han, hadn't the formation spirit immediately appeared? And now? Had he gone out to lunch or a washroom break? Because I represent justice, Ling Han said in all seriousness. Woof, woof, woof. The large black dog was the first to burst into laughter. Ling Han represented justice? This two-faced man, what a joke. Justice is invincible. Ling Han continued, his tone incredibly serious. The second imperial prince faltered for a moment before almost exploding in fury. Are you playing with me? Justice and invincibility? Invincible, your sister. If justice was truly invincible, then who would still cultivate? However, it was really strange. Where was the formation spirit and why was there still no reaction? Who exactly was Chun Fengyan's son here? Ling Han laughed loudly as he continued to pummel the second imperial prince. Only when he had almost killed the latter did he stop. He clapped a hand on the second imperial prince's shoulder and said with a smile, remember this lesson. In future, you have to behave and be good. Otherwise, a righteous uncle like me will still appear and teach you a good lesson. The second imperial prince's face was bruised and battered, and he was already rendered speechless. There was only one question in his mind. Was he really Chun Fengyan's son? How could he screw his son over like this? Ling Han exited the second imperial prince's residence and headed to the third imperial prince's manor. Meanwhile, the news of him barging into the second imperial prince's manor and coming to blows spread even faster than him. Everyone was filled with disbelief. Firstly, Ling Han didn't have such courage, and secondly, he didn't have such powerful strength. Thirdly, even if he did have the courage and strength, how could Chun Fengyan not stop him? What a joke! Who would believe that? Thus, when Ling Han arrived at the residence of the third imperial prince, this place was completely unguarded. Ling Han naturally wouldn't be reserved. He charged in and forced the third imperial prince out. You! When the third imperial prince saw Ling Han, his face was filled with shock. He could not believe that Ling Han would really dare to charge right up to his doorstep. Ling Han cracked a smile. Third, are you surprised? Are you surprised? What an unexpected turn of events! The third imperial prince declared darkly. When he saw Ling Han, he knew that the rumors were not false. Ling Han was really so outrageously bold. He moved at the first instant. Boom, the celestial path-level aura exploded. With a leap, he charged towards Ling Han, his whole body glowing, as if he was a deity from beyond the heavens. However, in front of absolute strength, what was the use? Pong! Ling Han merely threw a punch, and the third imperial prince was sent flying, completely unable to fight back. Is my current battle prowess comparable to Ultimate Tao Foundation? Ling Han stroked his chin. His accumulation of power at the mortal level was really too deep, and the foundation of the celestial path that he had built was an imitation of that stone celestial foundation. Even the heaven and earth forbade it. He had built the human Tao Foundation, but it had definitely surpassed the heavenly Tao Foundation. In fact, it could even compare to the ultimate Tao Foundation. After beating up the third imperial prince as well, Ling Han went to the manor of the fourth imperial prince. Instantly, rumors arose again, saying that the third imperial prince was also beaten up terribly by Ling Han. Immediately afterward, the fourth prince was also beaten to a pulp. When this news was also revealed, finally, no one thought that it was fake. Where did so many rumors come from? Ling Han. Was he really going to defy the heavens? The fifth prince, sixth prince, eighth prince, and so on were all unable to escape the fate of being thrashed to their heart's content. The older imperial princes could be considered to have completely fallen, and only the eldest and the seventh princes were spared. After all, they were no longer on this planet. This made Ling Han feel slightly regretful. However, it was fine. Very soon, he too would go to the holy land of metal element, and it would not be too late to beat them up then. After suffering so many losses, the imperial princes naturally wouldn't give up. They all begged to see Chun Fengyan. Yet they didn't even know where Chun Fengyan was cultivating in seclusion. How were they supposed to face this injustice? They could only ask Empress Ma and the others for help, but even these consorts could only see Qin Fengyan once in a very long time. They were still unable to find him. This matter caused a great commotion in the imperial court. The old subjects were all filled with righteous indignation and thought that Ling Han had committed treason. He actually dared to beat up the imperial princes. Did he still have any regard for the laws of the nation? They were all pleading for Ling Han to be severely punished. This formed a united opinion in the court. But the problem was, who would be able to deal with Ling Han? In the first place, this person was the prodigy of the imperial capital. Now that he had advanced into the foundation building tier, not only was he invincible in human Tao foundation, it was as if even a heavenly Tao foundation couldn't deal with him. The problem was, where in the imperial capital would there be ultimate Tao foundation cultivators? Those sects? In terms of intimidation towards them, perhaps Ling Han and the name of the Foreign Affairs Department would be more useful? Thus, as long as Qin Fengyan didn't speak, who could stop Ling Han? You're awesome. Xianyuan Dingwa was sincerely impressed. Ling Han should be the first person to be able to sit calmly after beating up an imperial prince. Furthermore, he had not beaten up just one imperial prince, but a whole bunch of them. In this way, who would dare to trifle with the Foreign Affairs Department? Ling Han merely smiled. He patted Xianyuan Dingwa's shoulder and said, "Work hard on your cultivation, young man. I hope that when I return, you'll have already broken through to celestial path." "Definitely," Xianyuan Dingwa said with a nod. The miscellaneous matters here were basically resolved. So Ling Han decided to set out, heading towards the holy land of metal element. As per usual, the little lowly took out her shuttle and she and Ling Han sat in it. As for the other people, or dog, pig, and so on, they entered the essence nurturing gourd. Time to set off. Xiao, the shuttle tore through the air, and soon entered into the dark universe. After Ling Han advanced into the foundation building tier, he gained the ability to fly on a tool. However, if he wanted to fly on a tool, he needed to infuse a portion of his divine sense into his tool. However, Ling Han still wanted to forge the origin gold in the holy land of metal element. In future, he would also use the primal chaos extreme lightning as a weapon. If he split out a portion of his divine sense on a tool now, wouldn't it be a waste? Thus, he temporarily suppressed the thought of flying on a tool and decided to forge out the origin gold first. The little girl followed the star chart and began to search for spatial nodes to traverse through space. Otherwise, who knew how long it would take to fly from here to the holy land of metal element? Black Moon Planet. The shuttle passed through one node after another, leaving an endless distance behind it. Even so, half a year later, the shuttle finally arrived at the Black Moon Planet. The Black Moon Plain was a great planet, though there had never been an ancestral king. There had been a considerable number of saints. Thus, there were a considerable number of holy lands on the Black Moon Planet, such as the Holy Land of Metal Element, the Holy Land of Crimson Fire, the Holy Land of Intentionless, and so on. However, that was all in the past. Whichever Holy Land no longer had a saint standing guard, they had all long since died. However, even though the saints had died, the saint tools had still been left behind. It could exist for a very, very long time. Thus, these holy lands were still very powerful, and everyone needed to respect them. That was because once the saint tool showed its might, it could even kill venerate tier elites. Furthermore, there would definitely be techniques left behind by saints in the holy lands. One only had to learn a little bit, and his battle prowess would be enough to overwhelm his peers, which naturally made the holy lands even more superior. Pong! The little lowly steered the shuttle to land, but since she was steering it, how could she possibly land safely? Under the violent collision, Tang Yuner and Ling Han screamed in excitement. Ling Han was rendered speechless. How did the adults in her family teach their children? Tang Yuner put away the shuttle with a regretful expression. When she saw the structure below, she thought it was some sect, but when she crashed into it, she found out that it was an abandoned place. Ling Han released the Empress and the others. In this half-year's time, none of them had been able to absorb the power of heaven and earth, so their cultivation level had practically stagnated. From this aspect, it was really good to directly teleport through formations, saving time and effort. Coincidentally, the sun had just risen, so it was just right for them to cultivate. The Empress and the others all sat down in cross-legged positions, absorbing the power of heaven and earth to boost their cultivation level. Ling Han didn't waste any time. Although the brother monkey cultivation technique was no longer all that useful, it still had some effect, no matter how tiny it was. He couldn't waste it. He opened all the apertures in his body, extracting the power of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth here was much denser. Ling Han nodded. As expected of a great planet, the power of heaven and earth was far richer. However, it was precisely because the power of heaven and earth was dense here that the resistance that one had to overcome in order to fly here was also greater. Probably only 1 in 10 foundation building tiers would be able to fly on a tool at most. Furthermore, the mountains and plains would also be much sturdier than Celestial Sea Planet, and would not be destroyed so easily. Moreover, a considerable number of saints had appeared here before, so they would definitely strengthen the planet. The most important thing now was to get a celestial path-level cultivation technique, but who would easily teach such a technique? When it came to urgency, it was definitely the large black dog who was the most anxious. That was because he belonged to the chatterbox type. It would be uncomfortable even if he did not speak for a moment. What more when it had already been more than half a year, and he could only woof 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 woof? Thus, it definitely had to cultivate to the blood transformation tier as soon as possible. That way, even if it didn't ingest the transformation fruit, it wouldn't be a problem for it to speak. It sat on its knees like a human, its 2 front paws still clasped together, and added with a pair of eye-catching purple underpants. It was flamboyant to the point of speechlessness. After everyone finished cultivating, Ling Han and the others set off. They were completely unfamiliar with the Black Moon planet, so they had to know where the Holy Land of Metal Element was first. Everyone was still packed into the gourd. Ling Han used the movement technique, and his speed had already broken through 20 times the speed of sound. If he used the imminent skyline, it would be even faster. Though this was also very exhausting on mystical power, just how deep was Ling Han's foundation? If it was not for the fact that his physique could not keep up, he could completely run for 8 to 10 years. In less than half an hour, Ling Han entered into a small town. He let everyone out first, and they all entered into a restaurant. On one side, they could have a snack, while on the other, they would gather some information. It wasn't long before Ling Han grasped some preliminary information. This was the Shadow Demon Town, and it was named after the nearby Shadow Demon Mountain. Moreover, this place also belonged to the territory of the Holy Land of Metal Element. However, every Holy Land had once been incredibly prosperous and powerful. Thus, the territory of the Holy Land of Metal Element was even larger than the Celestial Sea Planet. This place only belonged to the outer circle of the Holy Land of Metal Element. The Metal Element Fruit Gathering was a distinguished gathering of the Holy Land of Metal Element, and would only open once every 20 years. Thus, even the residents of this place had no lack of understanding of this event. How were the people on the Black Moon planet supposed to participate in this gathering? Simple. One only had to enter into the territory of the Holy Land of Metal Element, and pass through one test after another, and one would be qualified. What kind of test was this? There were 9-story towers everywhere in the Holy Land of Metal Element, but they were divided into 3 levels: black iron, silver, and gold. As long as one could pass through these 3 types of 9-story towers, he would be qualified to go to the real Holy Land of Metal Element. In truth, those like the eldest Imperial Prince had only obtained the right to go to the Holy Land of Metal Element, and was not directly qualified to participate in the Metal Element Fruit Gathering. To Ling Han, as long as he passed through the 3 towers, he would be standing on the same level as the eldest Imperial Prince, Hong Tianbu, and the others. Coincidentally, there was a 9-story tower on the Shadow Demon Mountain which was black iron level. Only by passing through the 9-story tower of black iron level could one go to the 9-story tower of silver level, and then the 9-story tower of gold level. It was said that if one passed through the 9-story tower in a short enough time, they could also receive rewards, which were basically cultivation techniques or martial arts techniques. Ling Han couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. Although this kind of reward technique definitely wouldn't be a high-level technique, he now had 0 cultivation technique. No matter how bad it was still better than 0. Very well. After eating, Ling Han brought everyone up the Shadow Demon Mountain. Shadow Demon Mountain was extremely tall. The Empress and Hunyo were only slightly stronger than normal people, and after walking for a short while they were already panting. However, they saw this as a kind of training exercise, and only when they were completely exhausted did they enter into the essence nurturing gourd. The little lowly, the large black dog, and the fat pig were also slacking off and followed them in. Only the 7 toddlers accompanied Ling Han. After more than half an hour, Ling Han arrived at the summit. He saw that there was indeed a tall black tower built at the summit. It had a total of 9 floors, and there were no windows or doors. It was very lively at the foot of the tower, with many people queuing up. The 9-story tower could only accommodate 1 person at a time. Ling Han wasn't in a hurry either. He sat at the side and waited. In any case, there were still a few months until the metal element fruit gathering. Now that he had advanced into celestial path, he was finally qualified to study celestial level formations. In the half-year he had spent in the galaxy, he had not been idle either, and had been flipping through that precious book on formations. No wonder he had never understood celestial level formations before, because celestial level formations required the use of a large amount of spiritual power. For example, the area he was standing in now was very normal, but a Grandmaster Formation Master only had to step on it, and he would be able to change the terrain, forming a killing formation. A formation formed with a single thought. That was the level of Grandmaster. Of course, there were some heaven and earth powers that were too powerful, and even Grandmaster Formation Masters could not change them with a single thought. Then, they would still need to use formation foundations, and there were incredibly harsh requirements on the ingredients. Ling Han did have a few 1-star materials, but he had not completely grasped the formation foundations yet, and could not make them into formation foundations either. He had to plan slowly. Multiple formation patterns churned in his mind, changing to the extreme. The formation patterns were dead, but the power of heaven and earth was alive, so merely leaning formation patterns was useless. One had to learn how to draw inferences from one example, adapting to the situation. The path of formations was also wide and profound. Merely formation patterns alone had innumerable changes, which was enough to exhaust a whole lifetime of energy. However, Ling Han was different. He still had Wally who could help him predict changes. Just as he was engrossed in his thoughts, he heard a commotion rise up in the crowd. Lu Zhenglong has ascended to the 8th level. Toppling the tower, as long as there was someone in the 9-story tower, the corresponding floor would light up. Previously, the 7th level had lit up for quite a while, and now the 8th level had finally lit up, which meant that the person inside had passed through the 7th level. As expected of Lu Zhenglong, I wonder if he can take another step further. If he can reach the 9th level, or even pass through in fact, then his aptitude would be on the level of Black Iron. Although Black Iron level qualifications does not qualify him to join a holy land, it's still not difficult to enter the core formation tier or even the true self tier level sect. This is a chance for a carp to leap over the dragon's gate. Copyright. I'm really envious. Everyone was discussing spiritedly, and many people did not hide their jealousy. Ling Han was surprised. What was there to be envious about joining a true self tier or core formation tier level sect? Oh, he soon understood. This was not the celestial sea planet. The environment of cultivation here was already incredibly mature and stable, and there were 9 levels in the celestial path. Every level was clearly defined with strict hierarchy. To a true self-tier cultivator, a core formation tier cultivator was nothing but trash. Thus, for a foundation-building tier cultivator, being able to join a core formation tier level sect was naturally a great fortune. As long as they felt that their abilities had improved, everyone would seek out a 9-story tower to undergo a trial. However, if one failed the challenge after entering into the 9-story tower, they would not be able to issue another challenge within half a year's time. It would not cause others to become too engrossed in the matter of challenges. However, not only did this Lu Zhenglong fail to pass through the 9th level, he was not even qualified to set foot on the 9th level. Very soon, the light of the 8th level dimmed, and the doors at the bottom of the tower opened, and a disheveled man walked out. Unfortunately, Lu Zhenglongas still failed. Sigh, it's already so difficult to reach black iron aptitude. I really can't imagine how powerful those one-star geniuses are. Haha. If you are a one-star genius, you would be qualified to join the Holy Land. Actually, if you're really a one-star genius, going to a small sect is actually better. You can get more attention. There's a saying that it's better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. No, no, no. Even if he was an ordinary disciple in a Holy Land, he would still have more confidence than the Tao child of a small sect. Everyone began talking again, each having their own opinions. That was only a one-star genius. Was it really that difficult? Ling Han thought again. In the past, in the imperial capital, only the eldest imperial prince and Hong Tianbu could be considered as star-level prodigies. Even Princess Bixiao had only become a one-star genius after Brother Monkey unlocked the power of her bloodline. With such a comparison, one-star geniuses were indeed rare. It was no wonder that they could be directly taken as disciples by the Holy Lands. At first, he had thought that the conditions set by the Holy Land of Metal Element were too low, that as long as it was a one-star genius, they would be able to go to the Holy Land. Now that he thought about it, the reason why there had been so many people at that time was completely because too many extraterrestrial visitors had come. They were basically the strongest heirs and descendants of the sect master-level forces, so they were naturally awesome. Though Lu Zhonglong had failed to pass the test, he had still gained the support of the masses. Being able to ascend to the 8th level of the tower was already extraordinary, and he was worth befriending. At this moment, no one dared to challenge the tower again. After all, there was no need for those who were weaker than Lu Zhonglong to join in on the excitement. They would definitely be kicked out of the tournament. Rather than not being able to challenge the tower for the next 6 months, it would be better to wait until they were stronger to come back. There was no one else? You guys wait here, Ling Han said to the 7 babies. As long as the little guys grew up normally, they would be able to increase their cultivation level. As early as 2 months ago, when they were still in the galaxy, they had all stepped onto celestial path. There was no test from the heavens calamity. It was as if they were foundation-building tier cultivators in the first place, and had just cultivated back to this level. With the strength of the 7 babies, without Ling Han's protection, they were completely fine. Instead, Ling Han was worried that they would cripple someone. Yes, father. The 7 babies replied in their childish voices. Because they had advanced into celestial path, even 6th baby could control whether she revealed herself or not. Finally, she no longer had to be invisible and was always overlooked. Ling Han set off. He had just taken a few steps, when Xiao, a figure, flew down from the skies and landed at the entrance of the tower. Flying on a tool, everyone exclaimed in shock. To fly on the Black Moon planet, only 1 out of 10 foundation-building tier cultivators could do it. There was basically no one here that could do it, so they were naturally stunned. That was a young man that looked to be only 24 or 25 years old, at most. He had just put away a divine sword, and there was a haughty expression on his face as he swept an eye over everyone. His expression filled with disdain. Hiss, that's Han Qian. What, Zifeng Sec's Han Qian? He has always been known as a prodigy. I didn't expect that when he had just stepped into the foundation-building tier, he would actually be able to fly on a tool. Someone recognized this person, and after he spoke up, it instantly drew a heated discussion from the masses. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. He didn't care who this person was, but he definitely couldn't jump into his queue. Line up at the back, he said in displeasure. Han Qian was taken aback. He had just advanced into celestial path not too long ago, and had just learned how to fly on a tool, so he was very conceited. He thought that all the prodigies in the world were only so, and his self-confidence had soared to the extreme. But now, someone actually dared to make him queue up at the back? Ha ha! He sneered. You really don't know what you're talking about. Firstly, there is absolutely no way that you can pass the test of the 9-story tower, and secondly, what right do you have to command me? Han Qian, you have gone too far. A voice suddenly rang out. Everyone turned to look at the person who had spoken. What was going on today? First, there was Ling Han, and now there was this person. They actually dared to challenge Han Qian? That was a middle-aged man. He was tall and slender, and there was a large bow on his back. "Huntsman Huen!" someone exclaimed in shock. When he heard this name, even Han Qian looked wary. Huen was a veteran foundation-building tier cultivator, and it was said that he had already formed the foundation of Heavenly Tao, which was far more powerful than him. First come, first served. This is the most basic rule. Don't you even understand this? Huen asked calmly. Brother, who is right? Han Qian clenched his fists, forcefully suppressing his fury. The cultivation world was very realistic. Whoever was stronger would have the right to speak. He obediently retreated and did not try to be brave. Ling Han nodded at Huen. In this day and age, it was already very rare to see anyone speaking up for justice. Though he could kill this Han Qian with a single punch, seeing someone step out to speak up for justice still made his heart. He strode into the tower, and the doors immediately closed. This was a sealed-off space, but it wasn't dark. There was an unknown light source glowing, illuminating the inside. The space was not small and was circular in shape. Its radius was about 9 meters, and its height was only about 3 meters. The walls around it seemed to be forged from black iron, exuding the cold light of metal. Right in the middle of this iron room, there was a human figure that was forged from black iron, and was only 5 feet tall. Wang! The black figure's eyes suddenly lit up, and a powerful aura instantly emanated from its body. This was actually a foundation-building tier metal figure. It looked a bit like the War Colossus, but the War Colossus was much more powerful than it. Ling Han casually snapped his fingers. Pa! The metallic figure was sent flying, crashing into the wall and sliding down. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This was because he had only sent the metallic figure flying with a single finger. However, it hadn't shattered. What kind of material was it forged from? It was so powerful. Just as he was pondering, a flight of stairs appeared out of thin air. Alright, if this Iron Man could be easily destroyed, then how many people would the holy land of metal element have to expend to maintain it? It should be known that there was not just this one black iron tower. Thus, Iron Men should have very strong self-healing abilities. Ling Han walked up to the second floor. Like the first floor, this was also a metallic figure. With an outsider invading, the Iron Man immediately revived and launched an attack at Ling Han. Pa! Ling Han snapped his fingers again, sending the metallic figure flying. He had defeated his opponent in one go. He continued upwards and arrived at the 3rd floor. He then went on to the 4th floor and then to the 5th floor. He had dealt with all of them with a single strike. Outside, when they saw the black iron tower light up floor after floor, everyone was stunned. The speed was too fast, wasn't it? It was practically as if he was strolling around. He had not met his match at all. This guy was so strong. Genius! It is possible that a black iron-level prodigy is about to appear. Everyone was exclaiming in shock. In a small place like theirs, perhaps a prodigy that had passed through the 9-story tower would appear only once every 10 years or so. Meanwhile, Han Qian smirked coldly. He too could do the same. The test of these 9 levels of the black iron tower was harder and harder with each level. Thus, as long as one's abilities were strong enough, he would naturally be able to easily pass through the first 8 levels. The 5th level. He has reached the 6th level. So fast, he's reached the 7th level. The 8th level. As for the 9th level, in a short while, Ling Han had already arrived at the 9th level. It was still the same black metal figure. It had just charged over, when it was knocked down with a punch from Ling Han. Pa! A book fell from the top of his head and landed on the ground. Reward? Ling Han picked up the book and looked at it. There were 5 words written on it. Great Sun Lotus Technique. He flipped through it and couldn't help but look pleased. This was actually a cultivation technique. Just what he needed. He was presently lacking a cultivation technique. Ling Han couldn't help but sit down and flip through the Great Sun Lotus Technique. Very quickly, he had already flipped through it once and had a basic understanding. Unfortunately, it was not time for the sun to rise now, so he could not cultivate. However, he was too curious and couldn't help but channel it. Instantly, the power of heaven and earth materialized in front of him, and he absorbed it, surging it into his body. Why was it that this was clearly not the time for the sun to rise, yet he could still cultivate? So slow. Ling Han immediately thought. This speed was about the same as him absorbing the power of heaven and earth with his brother monkey cultivation technique. With such efficiency at this time, what would it be like to cultivate in the early morning? As expected, whether there was a suitable cultivation technique or not was too important. This great sun lotus technique was very short in length and only corresponded to the foundation building tier. It lacked the parts for cauldron forging tier and the levels after. However, Ling Han didn't care. He only needed a cultivation technique for now, and in the future he would definitely find a first-class cultivation technique, since this was used as a reward, and it was only the reward for passing through the Black Iron Tower. How good could it be? Ling Han stood up and descended to the first floor. There was a mark on his hand, and it disappeared in a flash, invisible to the naked eye. Did this mean that he had passed through the Black Iron Tower? This was more or less the same as the young dragon trial. They both liked to leave a mark on others. Ling Han pushed open the doors and walked out of the tower, strolling slowly. Has he passed? Having taken so long, it'll be tough. I guess he passed. After all, he fought so quickly on the first 8 levels. That may not be the case. Perhaps it is precisely because he had rushed ahead too quickly and expended all his battle prowess, so it would not be strange for him not to have passed the 9th stage. Everyone was whispering among themselves, while Han Qian smirked coldly. Whether Ling Han had passed or not, the time he had spent was really too long. He was definitely not as strong as himself. Brat, just watch, and I'll let you know what a prodigy is. He entered the Black Iron Tower. Ling Han had obtained a cultivation technique, so he was in a good mood. How could he possibly pay any attention to him? He directly left. Since he had already passed the Black Iron Tower's trial, he should go and find the Silver Tower next. He went to look for the children, yet he was surprised to discover that the 7 children had actually gotten along well with Huan, chatting and laughing. Making new friends? He asked with a smile. Father, this uncle is so interesting, eldest baby said with a smile. My stomach hurts from laughing. 6th baby clutched her stomach. 3rd baby said coldly, childish. Little brother, my place is located at the foot of the mountain. Why don't you come over for a visit? It's already late, so why don't you spend the night at my place? Huan took the initiative to extend an invitation. Ling Han also admired his righteousness, so he nodded and said, thank you for the trouble. The 2 of them descended the mountain with the children. When he saw how energetic the 7 children were, Huan couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Huan had a sizable manor at the foot of the mountain, occupying an area of 3 to 4 acres. The houses were connected, with rock gardens and a small stream, appearing very serene and elegant. Brother who is truly a refined person, Ling Han praised. No. Huan laughed loudly, but his expression was very pleased. He arranged a dinner for Ling Han and the others. Because it involved the secret of the essence nurturing gourd, Ling Han couldn't possibly let the Empress and the others out. It was fine. Worst come to worst, he could just pack some food for them to eat. Come, let's drink. Huan was very cordial, and repeatedly offered Ling Han a toast. After talking for a while, Ling Han also found out that this Huan was originally a hunter, but by chance he came across a fortuitous encounter, allowing him to walk on the path of martial arts. He even leaped over the celestial gate and became a foundation-building elite. However, it was hard to change his habits. Huan still liked to be a hunter, so he settled down in the Shadow Demon Mountain. Occasionally, he would enter the mountains to hunt. Of course, what he was hunting now were not ordinary wild beasts, but powerful demonic beasts that had not developed intelligence. Had your fill. Huan waved the wine pot and commanded a servant, bring me some wine. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. More or less. Have another jar of wine. Ha. Let's drink another pot of wine, Huan said with a smile. Ling Han couldn't convince him otherwise, so he nodded. The wine was served, and Huan filled Ling Han's cup. He then poured a cup for himself, saying, come, cheers. Ling Han picked up the wine cup, and when he put it to his lips, he paused for a moment. What is it? Can't get drunk? Wan asked. Ling Han shook his head. This wine can't be drunk. Why? Huan was surprised. Poison, Ling Han said calmly. Huan faltered for a moment before laughing loudly. Brother Ling, are you trying to make me laugh? I don't have that attribute. Ling Han shook his head. Only then did Huan frown. Are you sure? Positive. Huan nodded and said, Lu Qi, come here for a while. Ji, the doors opened, and a servant walked over. He bowed towards Huan. Master, what is your command? Do you know that this wine is poisonous? Huan asked calmly, but his voice was baleful and menacing. Pa, that servant immediately knelt down, his forehead covered with cold sweat. Tvi treated you well, yet you're repaying kindness with ingratitude. Humph! With a wave of his hand, Huan struck the top of the servant's head. Pa! The servant instantly collapsed to the ground, no longer breathing. Man-eating demon, the matter was resolved? Ling Han glanced at Huan, confusion flashing through his mind. Aren't you the slightest bit curious why he poisoned you? Sigh! Huan sighed. These servants are all people with blood on their hands. I took them down and let them cultivate their moral character here. I didn't expect this person to bear a grudge. Ling Han smiled and said, Brother who is truly benevolent, I'm impressed. You flatter me, Huan said with a shake of his head. By the looks of it, these people still lack discipline. I'll definitely be more strict in the future. After the incident with the poisoned wine, they were naturally in no mood for any more food and drink. Thus, Huan escorted them to the guest room. Father, do you really believe the words of that bearded uncle? Sixth baby asked. Ling Han shook his head. I don't know. Then why didn't you expose him? Eldest baby also asked. Do we have any proof? Ling Han said with a smile. Furthermore, I'm only suspicious now. If it's really as he said, wouldn't that be awkward? Oh, the 7 babies all nodded. If he really has malicious intentions, there will definitely be a second plan if this plan does not succeed. Just wait and see how he shows his true colors, Ling Han said. In truth, he too did not want Huan to be a bad person. After all, there were really too few good people in this era. They rested, but Ling Han couldn't sleep. He lay on the bed and studied formations. This path was really wide and profound, making him feel like he couldn't comprehend it even if he poured his heart and soul into it. Ling Han felt that he still hadn't grasped the basics yet. Otherwise, even though formations were ever-changing, they wouldn't be so difficult to grasp. At the very least, he would be able to get started. He's here. Ling Han sighed. He sincerely hoped that he had only misunderstood Huan. The latter was not the evil person he had imagined, but in truth, he was disappointed. He saw a secret compartment open, and soundlessly, a thin pipe stretched out. It was currently spewing out smoke. If he and the kids were already asleep, then it was extremely likely that they wouldn't have noticed. After all, foundation-building tier cultivators weren't omnipotent gods. But Ling Han was already suspicious, so how could he possibly be unguarded? He did not attack at the first instant, but rather closed his eyes and acted as if he had already been hit. After a while, the doors opened, and a person walked in. He was tall and slender, and under the moonlight he cast a long shadow. Huan walked in. His face was slightly flushed, as if he was under extreme excitement. You know how much I hope that the person who comes in isn't you, Ling Han suddenly said, sitting up straight. Huan couldn't help but feel surprised. He immediately went into a defensive stance, but in the blink of an eye, he relaxed and asked, You were already on guard against me? Do you think that, since I almost drank a cup of poisonous wine, I should sleep so carelessly and foolishly? Ling Han countered with a question of his own. You shouldn't, Huan said with a shake of his head. There was a smile on his face, and he continued, However, I'm a little confused. Why didn't you act out earlier? Why did you deliberately pretend that you had been affected by the medicinal effects? Why did you lure me out? Because I hope that this person isn't you, Ling Han said calmly. Huan was silent for a moment. then broke into a grin, though it was incredibly malevolent. Unfortunately, I have disappointed you. Why? Ling Han asked. Previously, you were still speaking up for justice, and now you want to harm me. This is very contradictory. Does everything have to be logical? Huan asked slowly. Give me a reasonable explanation. When I make my move, I can be more efficient and give you a quick death, Ling Han said. Ha ha ha. Huan laughed loudly. You have only built the foundation of human Tao, while I have built the foundation of heavenly Tao. Young man, do you think that you are a god just because you have passed through the 9-story tower? He had built the heavenly Tao foundation, and his level of being had surpassed Ling Han's. With a single glance, he could determine that Ling Han's cultivation level was weaker than his. Then, since he was building the foundations of heavenly Tao, and Ling Han would only be building the foundations of human Tao. Ling Han merely looked at him, and did not speak. All right, there's no harm in telling you. Huan found a chair and sat down. I'm only standing up for you because I'm taking this opportunity to have a reasonable chance of getting close to you and those 7 children. He paused, then continued. Let me tell you a secret. Previously, when I was still immortal, I had once been trapped on the snowy mountain with my companion. The strong winds could forcibly tear one's skin. When we were trapped until the 9th day, we were really unable to bear the hunger. Thus, we began fighting, both wanting to kill the other. Because that's precious food. There's naturally no need for me to explain the outcome, right? Since that time, I have been captivated by human flesh, and feel that it is the most delicious thing in the world. Even if I have advanced into celestial path, and merely by absorbing the power of heaven and earth, I would not starve to death or die of thirst. I still want to eat human flesh. Thus, I settled down here, and when I became hungry, I went to the Shadow Demon Mountain. I always managed to bring a few idiots back. Let me tell you, the meat of a cultivator is more fragrant than the meat of a mortal, and after stepping onto celestial path, there is another active factor in the meat. Not only does it taste better, it can also help one's cultivation level. A small part of the reason why I was able to build the foundations of heavenly Tao so quickly is because of this. Oh, that's right. The meat of a child is more fragrant. That's why I've set my eyes on you. After Huan finished speaking, he looked at Ling Han, as if he was anticipating him to show an expression of fear. Dying in a state of intense fear, one's muscles would have a unique smell. But to his disappointment, Ling Han's expression was calm, and there was not the slightest bit of fluctuation. This had far exceeded his expectations. Ling Han's reaction was too illogical. Ling Han tapped his finger on the table. You deserve to die. Many people said something similar before I killed them. Huan shrugged. But in the end, I ate them all. Ling Han snapped his fingers, and Xiao, a powerful force shot towards Huan, a mere human Tao foundation. Juan smirked coldly. Brat, you've just entered Celestial Path and all your knowledge is still stuck at the mortal level, right? Let me tell you, even a 1-star genius can only be invincible at the level of human Tao foundation. A 2-star genius can just barely match the early stage of heavenly Tao foundation. A 3-star genius can battle the peak stage of heavenly Tao foundation. And I am at the peak stage of heavenly Tao foundation. He casually sent out a palm strike towards the gust of energy. Could you possibly be a 3-star genius? Of course not. If it really was a 3-star geniu, the Holy Land would have long since treated him like a treasure and taken him in as a personal disciple. Pa! The two forces collided, and Huan's power instantly crumbled. Meanwhile, Ling Han's finger was still aimed at Huan, leaving a trail of blood on his left shoulder. What? Huan paled in shock. Even a 3-star genius could only fight him to a tie, but Ling Han actually wounded him with a single strike. What the hell was this? Could it be? It was a 4-star genius? That could be invincible even with a gap of 1 level. Ling Han stood up. Do you have any last words? Huan's eyes darted around, and he suddenly turned around and fled. A battle hammer had already appeared beneath his feet, bringing him away through the air.